Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tiffany Maher. Tiffany Maher was born on April 29, 1973, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Her father was a college professor, and her mother, a Harvard graduate, eventually became a housewife. They had high expectations for Tiffany. Her parents set a goal for her to earn a college degree, and they worked hard to support her. Tiffany had a high IQ, and her family created a nurturing environment focused on education. As a result, she entered university, fulfilling her parents' dream for her. Tiffany has a sociable and humorous personality. She is very intelligent and friendly. Tiffany is not interested in romantic relationships. She focuses on her studies, which she enjoys very much. She feels that she has the ability to achieve great things with her intelligence, so she has chosen to postpone looking for a life partner. Tiffany is 40 years old and lives in the small town of Tayan, Oklahoma. Although intelligent and educated, she is still single and is looking for her soulmate. She has a deep affection for animals, so her friends gave her 2 cats. The cats have become an important part of Tiffany's life. She loves them dearly and treats them as if they were her own children. During this time, Tiffany served as an associate professor in the chemistry department at Northeastern State University. She was well known for her sociable and friendly nature, easily connecting with everyone. Her lectures were not only informative, but also engaging, featuring a mix of stories and jokes that kept students entertained. Her cheerful personality made her beloved by everyone in her circle. Outside of work, Tiffany enjoyed crocheting and going to karaoke with friends. She was comfortable being alone and dedicated herself to her work, becoming one of the university's leading specialists, which was greatly appreciated. Tiffany often expressed that her job brought her happiness and allowed her to grow in her field. While many of her peers were focused on starting families and having children, she concentrated on education and expanding her knowledge. The situation changed as she got older. She wanted to find a partner to help her through the tough times. To achieve this, she created a profile on a dating website, hoping to meet the person she had always secretly dreamed of. On May 31, 2013, Tiffany's best friend, Sarah, received an unexpected text message from a staff member at the university where Tiffany worked. Tiffany was scheduled to give a presentation that day, but she did not show up, which was unusual for such a responsible person. Regardless of the circumstances, she always arrived early and prepared thoroughly, so her absence was very worrying. When the head of the educational institution spoke with other teachers, it became clear that Tiffany had not appeared in the department for several days. This aroused suspicion and caused anxiety. Sarah was really worried about her friend. She tried to contact Tiffany, but couldn't get through. For days, Tiffany ignored both calls and texts. Sarah had a feeling that something was wrong, but she tried to push those worrying thoughts away. When Sarah arrived at Tiffany's house, she immediately noticed something unusual. There was a black stain, like soot, on one of the second-story windows. Tiffany's car was missing from the driveway, which was unusual because she always parked there when she came home. Sarah also noticed that a small window, which Tiffany usually left open for her cats to come and go freely, was closed. Curious, Sarah went to the window to look inside and was devastated to see Tiffany's cat lying motionless on the floor. The situation was becoming increasingly alarming. Sarah decided not to go in, stayed outside, and called the police. She called 911 and explained what she had discovered, asking them to check on Tiffany. When police arrived at the scene, they found the main door of the house unlocked, allowing them easy access inside. Inside, they witnessed a horrific scene. There were many small fires in the house that had gone out. In the bedroom, they discovered Tiffany's body lying on the bed. Surprisingly, Other than her burned legs, there were no visible injuries on Tiffany's body, and there were no defensive wounds on her hands or anywhere else on her body. After investigating the crime scene, the police determined that the fire originated in the living room and bedroom on the first floor. An object was placed under the sofa, but it did not catch fire, so the fire went out. A similar incident occurred in the bedroom, where the bottom of the bed was burned. The police who arrived at the scene discovered that several items were missing from Tiffany's home, including a laptop, a cell phone, a TV, a karaoke machine, and a car. The police concluded that this was likely a robbery. In addition, there are concerns that Tiffany may have been sexually assaulted. Suspicious marks on her underwear raise suspicion. All of these details will be collected for testing. A citywide alert was issued to begin searching for Tiffany's car, a 2011 red Ford Fiesta. Forensic experts quickly collected evidence at the crime scene, while police interviewed neighbors and people close to Tiffany. Since there were no signs of forced entry, it is believed that Tiffany knew the attacker and let him into her home willingly. Police first spoke with Tiffany's mother, Maria. She reported that she last saw her daughter on May 26, just 5 days before Tiffany was found. Maria and some relatives had attended a basketball game that day and had a good time together. Tiffany had plans to attend a date that evening, but did not share any details about the date. Maria noted that Tiffany seemed calm, untroubled, and had not received any threats. After the autopsy was completed, the medical examiner provided new information. They concluded that Tiffany died of asphyxiation, possibly from the pillowcase found at the scene. The police needed more time to investigate, but they found no signs of strangulation. Forensic experts also ruled out the possibility of death from fire because there was no smoke in Tiffany's lungs, suggesting she died before the fire broke out. It appears the killer set the fire to destroy evidence of the crime. The medical examiner estimated that Tiffany had been killed on May 26, 5 days before Sarah reported the incident to the police. The information Tiffany's mother provided about Tiffany's meeting on the day of her death seemed important. It was essential to find out who Tiffany was meeting with. The police needed to identify Tiffany's contacts and her method of communication. Tiffany's mother suggested that they investigate her office at the university, where she often spent a lot of time. At first, the office seemed unremarkable. However, police found a working computer and discovered that Tiffany had a profile on a dating website. Her best friend confirmed that Tiffany had recently been considering dating and finding a partner. Tiffany was using a popular Canadian dating website at the time. Police contacted the site's administrators to gather information about Tiffany's dating activities and messages. Since the site was based in Canada, they had to submit a request and wait for a response. Police then received a tip that led them to Tiffany's car, which had been found abandoned in the parking lot of an apartment building where her parents lived. Her parents did not mention the presence of the car, which aroused suspicion. Police interviewed them again, but her parents were completely unaware that their daughter's car was in the parking lot. After questioning, it became clear that her parents had nothing to do with the incident. It appeared that the criminal had intentionally left the stolen car near her parents' home to throw the investigation off track. The car was confiscated and sent for examination. Forensic experts examined it to find any signs of a potential thief. They discovered fingerprints on the steering wheel and DNA samples that did not belong to the Tiffany. The Canadian dating site's management has finally responded. They revealed that in early May, Tiffany created a profile and contacted multiple men at once. However, she mainly corresponded with one person. Unfortunately, this person did not provide his real name or surname. His account was Fander 1980. There were no photos or phone numbers associated with the account, which raised suspicion from the start. Sadly, the account was deactivated the same day her body was discovered. It is possible that this person was involved in the murder, but attempts to contact him have been unsuccessful. Police were able to access messages exchanged between Tiffany's account and a user named Fander1980. Their conversations lasted for a long time and did not contain any flirtatious behavior. Police reviewed Tiffany's phone records and discovered that she was frequently communicating with someone, although this person's name was not saved in her contacts. When they called the number, no one answered. However, after further analysis, they discovered that the phone number was registered to an account named Big Daddy on another website, which was the same person named Fander1980. The criminal was registered at an address in Talos, but when police arrived, they found only an abandoned commercial building. It was clear that the suspect had made efforts to conceal his identity. When the police accessed Big Daddy's account, they discovered it had been deactivated on May 2, just 2 days after the Tiffany's death. Remarkably, just 3 minutes later, he registered again under a new name. Given that several items were stolen from the Tiffany's home around the same time, the police decided to check local pawn shops. This means the thief's information may have been recorded by the pawn shop employees. The investigation included checking pawn shops in the city. It was discovered that a man named Joshua John Schneider had gone to one of those stores with Tiffany's items. Police eventually identified him as the prime suspect. 38-year-old Joshua was from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Joshua was a regular at the police station and had served time in prison for car theft and sex crimes. He was convicted of rape in 1999. Joshua often used dating websites to find lonely women to rape. While Joshua was living with his girlfriend and their 2-year-old daughter, police tried to contact him at his home address, but he was not there and could not be reached. Police spoke to Joshua's mother, who said she did not know where her son was. On July 27, 2013, the police received a tip about Joshua's whereabouts from an anonymous person. Police were then dispatched to arrest him. This led to a police chase. Joshua was in the car with Heather and child at the time. Police followed him until he reached a wooded area near Tulsa, where he abandoned the car and fled, leaving his family behind. Joshua was arrested 10 days later, and during the arrest, Tiffany's cell phone was discovered in his backpack. Despite this evidence, Joshua claimed that he knew nothing about Tiffany. However, police soon found Tiffany's laptop and other stolen items at Joshua's home, where he lived with girlfriend, Heather Black. This raised suspicions about Heather's involvement, leading to her arrest as well. The child was placed in the care of Child Protective Services, and Joshua's DNA was found on Tiffany's bedsheets and on the steering wheel of her car. This evidence linked him to the crime. The police found a text message from his mother on his phone. She had written it shortly after the police arrived at the house. She warned him that he should run away because the police were looking for him. She was then made an accomplice, as she had tried to cover up for the murderer. Joshua and his mother, Karen, were then taken to the police station. It was clear that she was trying to warn her son and help him avoid the police. It is also possible that she was involved in the crime, and those theories need to be investigated. At first, Karen claimed that she did not understand what was going on. However, when she realized that the police had strong evidence for an arrest, she became increasingly concerned. She eventually admitted that she had warned her son after the police arrived, but denied any involvement in any other wrongdoing. In July 2013, Joshua was arrested for murder, rape, robbery, and attempting to cover up the Tiffany investigation. His girlfriend, Heather, chose to cooperate with the police, and all charges against her were dropped. During the hearing, she confirmed that Joshua had confessed to Tiffany's murder and that he had tried to avoid the police, putting both her and her daughter in danger. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Joshua began to speak out. He claimed that his online relationship with Tiffany began as a simple flirtation, but they eventually decided to meet in person. On the day of their meeting, they had sex and then spent some time talking. When Joshua suddenly confessed that he was living with a girl and a child, Tiffany was furious. She then threatened to expose their relationship. This led to a fight. While trying to defend herself from Tiffany's attacks, he hit her, causing her to fall and become unconscious. There was also a fire, and he was not sure how it started. He claimed that when Joshua left the scene, Tiffany was dead. However, the prosecutor's office believed his entire story to be a lie and found it completely unbelievable. The prosecutor's office pieced together the facts of the case. On May 26, Tiffany attended a basketball game with her parents. That evening, she met Joshua at her home. When he arrived, Joshua overpowered her, attacked her, and then strangled her. He claimed that their encounter was consensual, but experts believe that was not the case. He decided to kill Tiffany and then steal her belongings. He then tried to burn the house down to destroy the evidence. However, he fled the scene before realizing that the arson had failed. It was clear that the fire was intentional. After leaving the crime scene, he stole Tiffany's car. He then used it to drive to Tiffany's parents' apartment complex. He left the car there to distract the investigation. Police discovered that some of the stolen items were sold by Joshua at pawn shops, while other items such as his phone and computer were left at his home, Joshua. The defense argued that Joshua had been abused by his father as a child, which had a negative impact on him. However, this claim is not convincing, given the horrific nature of the massacre. There is no way to justify such actions. Joshua was a danger to society and showed no remorse for his crimes. Throughout the trial, there was no sympathy for his. As a result, the jury found Joshua John Schneider guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Joshua was denied parole. He questioned the jury's ability to conduct a fair investigation and argued that Tiffany's death could have been an accident or manslaughter, since she had invited Joshua to her home. His attorney sought a retrial, believing that this would result in Joshua receiving a fair trial. The defense argued that Joshua's constitutional rights had been violated and that the investigation had been hasty in its conclusion. The defense argued that not all of the evidence from the investigation was presented to the jury. They pointed out that Joshua's girlfriend Heather was involved in the case. However, she was able to clear herself of any wrongdoing. Joshua is serving his sentence at the Davis Correctional Facility in Holdenville, Oklahoma. Despite this outcome, the lawyer continued to advocate for Joshua's case. He appealed to the jury's sympathy, highlighting that Joshua had a 2-year-old child who would be left without a parent. The defense maintained that Joshua was incapable of committing such a crime, arguing that he loved his son and did not want to return to prison and lose the chance to raise him. Once again, accusations were directed at Heather, but these efforts did not yield any changes in Joshua's sentence, which was ultimately upheld. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neville and June Bamber. June and Neville became the owners of White House Farm. A Royal Air Force veteran, after many years of service, he transitioned to a position as the master of a small local court. In 1949, June married he at the age of 25, and that same year, they moved into their new farmhouse. Their dream is to have children and build a happy, close family. However, June could not get pregnant. After numerous attempts, they discovered that the issue was genetic, and they would not be able to have biological children. However, they did not lose hope, and they were able to find a way to become parents. The Bamber family adopted 2 children from an orphanage. First, they adopted Sheila, who was just 3 months old, and a few years later, they adopted 6-month-old Jeremy. June and Neville cared for and educated their adopted children conscientiously, giving them all their love and tenderness. As Sheila and Jeremy grew up, they ensured they received a good education by sending them to prestigious private schools with high-quality standards. The Bambers' financial situation was very good, allowing them to take care of themselves and their children fully and comfortably. Like any family, June and Neville also faced problems in their relationship. Not having a biological relationship with your children can sometimes make the situation more complicated. However, for the most part, their family life proceeded smoothly, without any major conflicts. In 1985, Sheila was 28, Jeremy was 24, and their adoptive parents, June and Neville, had just turned 60. That summer was so peaceful, with everyone enjoying the sun and nature, until the early hours of August 7th. At 3:30 a.m., Jeremy was awakened by an unexpected phone call. When he answered, he was shocked when he heard his father, Neville, on the other line. Neville's voice was frantic and distressed. He struggled to explain that Sheila had gone crazy and have weapons. While Jeremy still didn't fully understand what was going on, the call suddenly lost connection. Alarmed, Jeremy immediately contacted the police, relaying what Neville had said. He also warned them that Sheila could be dangerous. Despite the urgency, it took the police an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. By then, it was still dark, and the house was shrouded in shadows. The area was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Neville had described. Since firearms were reportedly involved, the police approached cautiously, adhering to standard procedures. Then, they decided not to enter the house. Instead, they waited outside, wait for the task force to come and handle it. The police positioned themselves at a safe distance from the house and used a megaphone to try to communicate with anyone inside. For more than 2 hours, police tried to contact Bamber's family, but received no response. During this time, the police asked Jeremy to explain what had happened at the Bamber household the previous day. He explained that the entire family had gathered for dinner the night before. Toward the end of the evening, there had been a minor misunderstanding, but not serious. He also mentioned that he had left a pistol and a .22 caliber carbine with his parents. Both guns were in good working order and loaded. Nearly 3 hours after the first police officers arrived, at approximately 8 a.m., the special forces entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. The team cautiously advanced, inspecting the first floor. When they entered the kitchen, they found a scene of chaos. A chair facing down on the ground, and next to it, in a pool of blood, was Neville's lifeless body. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which hit the head, leaving him with little chance of survival. His hands and face were bruised and scraped, with a broken nose and jaw, shows that he fought back drastic against the attacker. The officers completed their search of the first floor, then, they moving upstairs. Each step had to be made with caution to avoid noise, but this is very difficult. Because the floor is old and makes a creaking sound every time it is moved. On the second floor, in 2 bedrooms, they discovered 4 more bodies. They found June, Sheila, and 2 6-year-old boys, Daniel and Nicholas, all of whom had been fatally shot. June had been struck by 7 bullets, while Daniel and Nicholas sustained 5 and 3 shots, respectively. Sheila was found on the threshold of her parents' bedroom, with 2 gunshot wounds under her chin. In total, 25 bullets were used to kill the 5 members of Bamber family. Initially, police theorized that the Bamber family members had been deliberately killed. But who could have committed such an act? Was the perpetrator an acquaintance of the family, who had long planned to harm them and then finally carried it out? Or was the criminal so clever that he tried to fool the police with a fake clue? These questions remained unanswered, prompting the authorities to immediately begin an investigation. It is remarkable that although Sheila and Jeremy were both very well educated, they grew up with completely different personalities. Jeremy was introverted from a young age, preferred solitude, and did poorly in elementary school. Sheila, on the other hand, always had many friends around her. Jeremy is hot-tempered and has difficulty controlling his emotions. Even though his parents tried to educate him, but he still did not change. Eventually, they decided to send him to boarding school, which happened in 1970, when he was 9 years old. Boarding schools in England at that time were famous for their strict and harsh discipline, applied to all ages of students. Attending such institutions was expensive, but this was not an issue for the Bambers. As soon as Jeremy entered the boarding school, he realized he could no longer behave as he had before, as any disobedience was met with punishment. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of telling his classmates that he had come from an orphanage. His friends used that information to bully him. They often taunted him about being adopted, calling him a bastard. His years at boarding school were a challenging period for him. Although they didn't teach him many good things, they did help him improve his character somewhat. Over time, Jeremy became calmer, went on to university, and successfully graduated. Neville was extremely proud of his son and even bought him a ticket to Australia. For the next 4 years, he traveled extensively across the country, spent time living in New Zealand, and eventually returned to England in 1982. Upon his return, his parents, Neville and June, asked him to work on their farm. Along with the job, they provided him with a place to live, a cottage 6 kilometers from the farm, along with a car and a monthly salary of nearly $1,000, a generous amount for the time. They wanted to ensure that he had a comfortable life and did everything they could to support him. Additionally, they hoped he would help them when they were old. June, a very religious woman, had a hard time accepting the fact that her children had different views and attitudes about religion. Throughout her life, she did everything to guide them toward what she believed was the true path and to bring them closer to God. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful. So, she had suffered from severe depression, and her mental health had greatly deteriorated. At the time, mental health issues were treated with a crude and outdated method, administering electric shocks to the patient. It was believed that this could positively influence brain function. June's depression wasn't caused solely by her son, Jeremy. Her daughter Sheila, despite her calmer demeanor, also caused her great distress. Sheila enjoyed looking at magazines featuring models in provocative poses. Sheila dreamed of becoming a model and appearing on the cover of such magazines. However, she does not support this. But Sheila's problems don't stop there. One day, Sheila announced to her parents that she was pregnant. In many families, the news might have been met with joy, but the Bamber family is not like that. Sheila was still a teenager and unmarried, which made the situation complicated. June, her adoptive mother, faced a difficult decision. Should she pressure Sheila to have an abortion? As a Christian, June could not condone abortion, but at the same time, allowing the child to be born is unacceptable. Then, June told Sheila to make her own choice, but on the condition that if she had an abortion, no one in the family would know. This makes the relationship between June and Sheila more and more tense. In 1977, despite her parents' objections, Sheila is married to Colin Caffell. They on to have twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel. Initially, their family life seemed happy, but Sheila began to suspect Colin of infidelity. Her suspicions were correct, and she eventually filed for divorce. In 1982, they are officially divorced, which had a devastating impact on Sheila's mental health. She couldn't bear the shock from the divorce, so she fell into depression, and she was eventually admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Nicholas and Daniel were sent to an orphanage, where they stayed for nearly 2 years. During this time, Sheila's mental health deteriorated further. She became increasingly anxious, frequently spoke about ending her own life and that of her children, whom she believed were possessed by the devil. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Sheila and Jeremy seemed to swap positions with each other. Jeremy, who was a rebel for years, now lives a peaceful and stable life. In 1985, Sheila reconciled with her ex-husband, Colin. Together, they removed Nicholas and Daniel from the orphanage and start a new life together. In August, Neville and June invited Sheila and her family to visit, so they could reunite with their grandchildren, Daniel von Nicholas. They hadn't seen their two nephews in a long time. They decided that the family would spend a week together, after which Colin would take the boys on a trip to Norway. On Tuesday, August 6, 1985, Colin brought the boys to the family farm. And everyone gathered at the Bamber house. The day was filled with joy. There was a family dinner, a happy atmosphere, and delicious food. Later, Neville and June asked Sheila to take Daniel and Nicholas back to the orphanage, arguing that she couldn't provide them with a proper education. This suggestion angered Sheila. She replied that she would make the decision herself. The calm atmosphere of the evening was disrupted at 8:30 p.m. Around the same time, Jeremy left the house. Barbara Wilson, the secretary at Bamber Farm, called Neville regarding a work-related matter. When Neville answered, she realized he seemed very annoyed. In the background, she could hear raised voices, as though people were arguing or upset about something. This was unusual for the Bamber family, which surprised she. However, she couldn't learn more about the situation because Neville quickly ended the call and hung up. The next morning, everyone present in Bamber's house was shot dead. Jeremy, the only survivor, was informed of the tragedy. Overcome with grief, he couldn't hold back his tears. Investigators treated him with respect, allowing him time to gather himself before beginning their questioning. Jeremy shared everything he knew, including the hardships Sheila went through, and the argument that had occurred at the dinner table on the evening of August 6, shortly before he decided to leave the house. At first glance, the crime that Sheila committed seemed to be an act of desperation and impulsivity, because at the time, she was suffering from mental illness. After hearing Neville and June's suggestion that she should return her two sons to the orphanage, she felt the interference in her private life was unacceptable. When she lost control, she grabbed a weapon and shot Neville, June, Daniel, Nicholas, and finally shoot yourself. Investigators believe this is what happened. However, there is one very strange detail. Sheila had been shot twice in different parts of her body. How could she have managed to do this to herself? The actions of the detectives were puzzling. They decided to burn the blood-soaked bedsheets carpet, where the bodies were found. They explained that they wanted to help Jeremy avoid the painful memories of the incident. Furthermore, the weapon discovered at the crime scene, which was a key piece of evidence, was improperly handled by the investigator. They picked it up with their bare hands without wearing gloves. A few days later, Bamber's family funeral was held, and Jeremy attended. He seemed distraught over the tragedy, weeping over the coffins of his sister, parents, and nephews. However, on that day, the investigation was reopened. Relatives of Bamber's family have expressed concerns about Jeremy's unusual behavior. Despite his tears, he made odd remarks, such as referring to himself as the boss. They found him smiling with the look of someone satisfied with victory. They reported this to police, causing police to conduct a more thorough investigation. Crime scenes need to be investigated carefully and meticulously to avoid drawing hasty conclusions. The detectives began by examining the weapon. They discovered fingerprints from several individuals, including the investigator who had handled the gun without gloves. The appearance of Sheila and Jeremy's fingerprints is not surprising. Jeremy admitted the gun was his, explaining he had purchased it for hunting. It is also understandable that Sheila's fingerprints were on the gun, as the initial theory suggested she had used the gun as the murder weapon. A few days later, Jeremy's cousin secretly went to the Bamber family home to search the house. he convinced that Sheila was not involved in the murder. By this point, Jeremy had inherited to his family home and was living there alone. During the search, the cousin inspected every room and the closet, and he found a silencer for a .22 caliber carbine. Length of the gun, combined with the silencer, made it impossible for the attacker to have turned the weapon on themselves and fired. This discovery strongly suggested that Sheila could not have been the perpetrator. If Sheila had fired the gun without the silencer, a new question arises: why were traces of blood found on the end of the silencer? Sheila, who had been shot twice and was bleeding, could not have removed the silencer and hidden it deep in the closet. This suggests that the silencer was attached to the rifle in the murders. From this point, everything started to become clear. Julie, Jeremy's girlfriend, suspects him of being involved in killing his family. She contacted investigators and shared some information. She revealed that on the night of August 7th, Jeremy had called her, saying there were problems. However, when she tried to ask what was wrong, he abruptly hung up. She also recalled that shortly before the murders, he had repeatedly complained about his family. Most importantly, she revealed that the Bamber family had drawn up a will, which stated that all assets would be passed on to their children after their deaths. This made Jeremy very angry. He did not want to share the inheritance with his sister, Sheila. In addition, Jeremy also told Julie that he wanted to kill his family and blame it on Sheila, a mentally ill person. She reported all of this to the police, not because she wanted to help the investigation, but because she was feeling angry, so she had just learned that Jeremy had a new girlfriend. However, there is no direct evidence to prove Jeremy's guilt. He tried to mislead the investigation. He gave the police the name of a suspect, a plumber he'd have hired. However, when investigators questioned the plumber, they learned that he was completely innocent. He also has a solid alibi, helped to remove any suspicion against him. As a result, Jeremy Bamber became the primary suspect. He was taken into custody due to his inability to provide an alibi. However, the police released him after failing to find evidence linking him to the massacre. Surprisingly, he was allowed to leave the country. After inheriting the property, Jeremy's financial situation improved a lot. He sold Neville's car and to Saint-Tropez, France. Upon returning to England on September 29th, he was arrested and charged with the murder of the Bamber family. The trial began on October 3rd. One of the main points raised in court was about Neville's injuries. His body showed multiple bruises, suggesting that he had tried to defend himself from an attack. The medical examiner speculated that the injuries were caused by the same .22 caliber carbine. Sheila, a petite and frail woman, it seemed unlikely that she could have inflicted such severe injuries on her father. In contrast, Jeremy appeared capable of doing so. Neville's body showed signs of a struggle, with multiple bruises. Sheila also received several blows, but there were no signs of a struggle on her body, and her nails remained intact. The defense countered these arguments, that believed that Sheila suffered from mental illness, which made her the prime suspect, capable of committing a five-fold murder. They emphasized that she grew up on a farm, was skilled at handling guns, and was an experienced target shooter. Additionally, Jeremy's lawyers highlighted that Sheila's blood was fresher than the rest of the family's, so they claiming that she ended her life after killing others. This, they argued, could have been due to guilt or the sound of approaching police cars. However, the prosecution disputed these claims. If Sheila had been the killer and then end her life, then the policeman on duty near the house, they will hear the last gunshot. However, no sound was detected. Furthermore, Sheila could not have pulled the trigger with the silencer attached, as it would have been out of her reach. The silencer was also found in a closet, rather than on the carbine where it logically should have been. The defense is in a difficult position because it has no arguments to refute the prosecution. According to the prosecution's argument, The motive for the murder stemmed from Jeremy's anger when he learned the contents of the will. In the will, the inheritance was divided equally between him and Sheila. His greed for the inheritance led him to plan a massacre. On August 6th, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., Jeremy left his relative's house and went home. Later that night, he returned to their house on a bicycle he had taken from his mother, June, a few days earlier. He took a roundabout route and entered the house through an open bathroom window on the first floor. He climbed inside, retrieved the loaded gun, and went to June's bedroom. Then, he shot and killed her with 2 shots. Next, he aimed the gun at Neville, but Neville woke up and tried to defend himself, leading to a fight. During the struggle, he managed to shoot Neville. After killing Neville, Jeremy returned to the bedroom and killed Sheila and her 2 children, Daniel von Nicholas. He then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator, he placing the carbine in her hands. With his crime complete, he left the house on his bike. He called his girlfriend, Julie, almost revealing what he had done, and then called the police to report that Neville had allegedly called him. However, if Neville was threatened with a weapon, he would contact the police, not Jeremy. Jeremy's actions seemed to make everyone feel strange. Why didn't he come to the crime scene immediately after Neville's call? After considering the evidence and various assumptions, the jury deliberated for 9 hours and reaching a verdict. Ultimately, Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to 5 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. Jeremy, meanwhile, maintains his innocence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mallory Beach. Mallory Beach was born on April 18, 1999, in Walterboro, South Carolina, USA. She had 2 older sisters, Morgan and Savannah. At 19, Mallory graduated from Hampton High School and then attended the University of South Carolina. She worked at clothing boutiques in Fort and dreamed of becoming an interior designer. She loved animals, she had dogs and volunteered at an animal shelter. She was a bright and beautiful girl who was sweet, kind, and sociable, with many friends. She was dating Anthony Cook. They were friends with 20-year-old Paul Murdaugh, who came from a wealthy and influential family. On February 23, 2019, the group planned to attend a party at a house owned by the mayor's family. They decided to travel there using the Murdaugh's 5-meter sea hunt boat. The group included Mallory, her boyfriend Anthony, Anthony's cousin Connor, Connor's girlfriend Miley Altman, Paul, and Paul's girlfriend Morgan. All were under 21, but that didn't stop them from obtaining alcohol and drinking on the boat. Although they could have reached by car, they chose to go by boat to drink beer and other alcoholic drinks en route without encountering the police. Paul was driving the boat and had already been drinking. He used his older brother Buster's ID to buy alcohol at the store, which he was quite proud of. After arriving, they enjoyed drinking and eating oysters. The party went well, and 5 hours later, they headed back home. Paul, now quite drunk, was still steering the boat. He stopped at a bar along the shore to buy more alcohol and drank there with Connor, while their other friends waited outside, eager to get home. At around 2 a.m., Paul and Connor left the bar. Everyone boarded the boat to head home. Under the influence of alcohol, Paul's behavior worsened, and he became aggressive. For half the night, Paul was in his underwear, saying he was hot, despite the cold February weather. His friends even suspected he might have taken illegal substances earlier, as he occasionally did so. Anthony, who was much more sober than Paul, wanted to take control of the boat, but Paul refused, insisting it was his boat. The other friends tried to convince he to let Anthony steer, but which nearly led to a fight on board. Anthony asked he to drop them off at the nearest pier, but he refused and mockingly suggested they call an Uber, knowing they were on a river with no access to cars. His behavior was inappropriate, and his friends argued with him. Paul repeatedly walked away, leaving the wheel unattended. He shouted at his girlfriend, Morgan, then hit her, spat on her, and pushed her so hard that she fell. Mallory and Anthony were upset by this and stayed at the stern of the boat. After seeing he hit and pushed Morgan, Mallory yelled at him to stop and calm down. However, he ignored her, angrily glaring before returning to the steering wheel. In anger at Mallory, he accelerated the boat. It sped up so much that the friends were thrown about. Anthony and Mallory clung to each other. But they couldn't hold on for long. At 2:20 a.m., the boat crashed into a bridge, causing the friends to fall into the water. When Anthony surfaced, he was quickly swept to the other side of the river by a strong current, but Mallory wasn't with him. Everyone except Mallory managed to swim to the shore. She was nowhere to be found, despite their calls and searches. Anthony returned to his friends and searched the water for she, but he couldn't find her. The boat had no lights, and although they used flashlights, the darkness made it difficult to see. Meanwhile, Paul lay in the mud under the bridge, unable to get up. It was cold outside, and the water was freezing in February. Connor called 911 at 2:26 a.m. Anthony continued searching for Mallory in the water, while Miley stayed on the shore. Morgan, Paul's girlfriend, had hit her head severely and was bleeding. After the call, Connor and Miley climb up the bridge to see if they can see Mallory from up there, but they still didn't see her. Paul went on the boat to be with Morgan. The police and ambulance arrived promptly to aid Morgan, and the search for Mallory commenced. Meanwhile, Paul remained on the boat in his boxers, speaking on the phone and gesturing. When Paul finally left the boat, he was smiling and behaving as if nothing had happened. He did not join the search for Mallory, which angered Anthony so much that he nearly attacked Paul, but the police stepped in to prevent it. The Coast Guard informed all ships to search for Mallory in the water. Meanwhile, Paul, Connor, Miley, and Morgan were taken to the hospital for treatment. Anthony stayed back to search for Mallory, despite he being soaked and very cold. At the hospital, the police came to question everyone, but Paul's father, Alex, and grandfather intervened. The Murdaughs, Paul's family, were wealthy and influential. Since 1920, they had held the position of chief prosecutor in the district. They also had their own law firm and were prominent in private practice across the district. They used their influence to pressure the police and hinder the investigation. Night searches for Mallory failed, and the next day, a large-scale search involving divers and helicopters began. Anthony did not go to the hospital and instead continued looking for she at the river. He spent days helping rescuers search for her. Volunteers eventually found her body on March 3, about 5 miles from the boat wreck site. An autopsy revealed that she died due to drowning and head trauma from a blunt object. She had hit her head, lost consciousness, drowned, and the strong current carried her away from the accident site. About 500 people attended her funeral. It was clear that Paul's irresponsible behavior and drunken boat driving caused this tragedy. However, the influential Murdaugh family went to great lengths to keep Paul out of prison. The police stated that it was unclear who was steering and who accelerated the boat. Paul denied being responsible, though he couldn't recall who it was. However, everyone else on the boat claimed it was Paul. The police argued that the friends' statements were unreliable because they might have been intoxicated. Paul's blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit. Investigators found beer and other alcoholic drinks in the boat's refrigerator. CCTV footage showed Paul buying alcohol at a local store, appearing pleased after the purchase. Moments later, he was seen crawling around the boat's refrigerator with beer. The boat's GPS indicated that the friends stopped at the pier around 12:45 a.m. Surveillance videos captured Paul and Connor at a bar, and later, The footage showed all the friends returning to the boat. Mallory family was frustrated with the inadequate investigation of the case, and the perpetrator will likely go unpunished. They initially filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the store and the individual who sold alcohol to Paul, but it was dismissed. Subsequently, they sued Buster had allowed Paul to use his ID to buy alcohol. This lawsuit was filed on April 18, 2019, which would have been Mallory's 20th birthday. Paul faced 3 felony charges: boating under the influence causing the death of Mallory and injuring 2 others, Connor and Miley. He pleaded not guilty to all charges and was released on a $50,000 bail awaiting trial. His bail conditions allowed him to travel, consume alcohol, and operate a boat. At his court appearance, Paul, dressed in a plaid shirt, sat in the hallway on the phone, never handcuffed or in a prison uniform, and had never been jailed. While the trials are about to take place, a tragic incident occurred. On June 7, 2021, Paul and his mother, Maggie, were found shot to death at their home near the dog kennels. Alex discovered them at 10 p.m. when he returned. Paul was shot in the chest and head with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot in the head with a rifle. Only shell casings were found at the scene, suggesting 2 different weapons had been used, leading police to suspect 2 perpetrators. The shootings occurred between 9 and 9:30 p.m., shortly before Alex arrived. Paul's phone was found in an unusual position, as if tampered with, and Maggie's phone was missing. It was later located outside the residence using the Find iPhone feature. Fingerprints and DNA from the killer were collected from it. The Beach family sent a letter of condolence to the Murdaugh family. They extends their deepest and warmest sympathies to the Murdaugh family during this terrible time. Having suffered the devastating loss of their own daughter, they praise that the Murdaugh family can find some peace after this tragic loss. They sincerely hopes that someone will come forward and cooperate with the police so that the perpetrator of these senseless crimes can be brought to justice. The police have classified the deaths of Paul and Maggie as a double murder. However, there are currently no suspects, even though the investigation is still ongoing. Many have speculated whether their murders may be related to Mallory's previous boating accident. But this connection has not been confirmed. Everyone present on the boat that day provided their fingerprints and DNA samples, which did not match those found on the phone of Maggie. While details about the case remain largely undisclosed, it's known that the Murdaugh family had several enemies and received threats, but they ignored these threats. Mallory's death is not the only one linked to the Murdaugh family. Years ago, their 50-year-old housekeeper was found dead. On February 26, 2018, she allegedly tripped and fell to her death. The Murdaughs paid her family $500,000, and the case was not pursued further. Before that, on July 8, 2015, the body of 19-year-old Stephen Smith, who supposedly had a relationship with Murdaugh's family's eldest son, was discovered on a sandy road. Stephen's face was badly beaten, with a hole on the right side of his forehead and numerous bruises and cuts on his body. However, his clothes and shoes were intact, and his phone and car keys stayed in his pocket. Stephen's car was found several miles away. The medical examiner determined Stephen was hit by a car, despite the lack of skid marks, headlight fragments, or any evidence of an accident. The blow only affected his head. It was suggested that a large vehicle, like a truck, might have struck his head with its side mirror, but the origin of the hole in his head was unexplained. It was also odd that his keys and phone remained in his pocket after such a strong impact. Many believed he had been beaten to death, yet the police closed the case. Rumor has it that everyone is afraid of getting involved with the powerful Murdaugh family, which led to these cases remaining unexplored. In 2021, Connor, one of the boat passengers, also sued the Murdaugh family for trying to blame him as the boat's driver. In memory of Mallory, a non-profit charity called Mal's Buddy was created, which raises funds to build a new animal shelter in Hampton County, South Carolina. Alex Murdaugh was arrested in July 2022 after a Culloden County grand jury returned an indictment charging him with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime in the deaths of Maggie and Paul. The indictment said Alex shot his wife with a rifle and shot his son with a shotgun. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole on all 4 counts on March 3, 2023. However, Alex maintained his innocence. He soon filed for a new trial, alleging that the court clerk had tampered with the jury. A new trial court judge denied the request in January 2024. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lynn Hernan. In Wisconsin, USA, there is a small town with a population of around 15,000, located near Milwaukee. On October 3, 2018, the tranquility of this town was shattered when Jesse Kachchki, the caregiver for Lynn Hernan, called 911. Jesse reported finding 62-year-old Lynn. There was no sign of life in her apartment, sitting in a reclined position amid a mess of scattered medications. Jesse informed the dispatcher that Lynn had been experiencing severe stomach pains for several months, which had been worsening over time. This pain may have led Lynn to take a lethal dose of medications. When emergency services arrived, the doctors confirmed Lynn Hernan's death, which was presumed to be due to poisoning. It was essential to perform all necessary tests, including toxicology, to determine the cause of Lynn's death. They took her to the forensic experts table, where blood was drawn, tissue samples were examined. And an unusual finding was a very high level of tetrazolline A. While this substance is found in certain drugs, none of the tablets located around the body contained it. As it turns out, tetrazolline A is found in some eye drops sold without a prescription, which are used to relieve eye redness and inflammation. This is particularly useful for allergic reactions and mild eye fatigue, and a few drops are typically sufficient. While these eye drops are safe when applied to the eyes, they can be harmful and even dangerous if ingested, especially in large amounts. Ingesting a significant quantity can lead to serious consequences, including vomiting, internal bleeding, memory loss, and even death at high doses. This aligns with the nurse's description of the prolonged suffering from stomach pain experienced by Lynn. The medical examiner's court was alarmed by the unusual circumstances surrounding Lynn's death, as there are much less painful and quicker ways to die. At 62, she likely did not want to endure suffering for months before dying. It appeared that her pain was due to a gradual increase in tetrazolline A levels in her blood. Based on this, the experts suggested that she might have been murdered. After reviewing the autopsy report, detectives concurred and initiated a criminal investigation. Lynn Hernan had no children and had outlived all her relatives. The first person police contacted to gather details about her death, even before the toxicology report was complete, was her nurse, 39-year-old Jesse Kachchki. Jesse had been caring for Lynn, who lived alone, for several years, and their relationship was described as friendly. Lynn saw Jesse not just as a nurse, but as a true confidant. About 5 years prior to the incident, Lynn struggled with both physical and mental health issues, including depression and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So she needed to be supervised, however, but no one in her family could help her. She dealt with several illnesses, but the most agonizing was her stomach pain. In the final months of her life, she could only consume soup due to intestinal problems. Jesse carefully overseen her diet and medication. Following the incident, Jesse was promptly called to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts were analyzing the body and gathering materials for a toxicology test. Initially, it seemed that police was simply obtaining information from Jesse. However, it quickly became clear that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. During the inquiry, both Jessie and her mother, Jennifer Flower, were present. Jessie's mother was worried because she believed her daughter might be in danger. She felt the detectives were overly focused on Jessie and might be trying to accuse her of murder. Ironically, her concerns only increased suspicion towards Jessie instead of alleviating it. The police tried to clarify with Jessie the cause that led to Lynn's tragic end. They questioned Jessie about why Lynn chose to end her life in such a dramatic manner. At this time, no one doubted Jessie's account. She genuinely believed Lynn had died by taking a lethal dose of drugs voluntarily. However, Jessie's behavior has made the police suspicious. Detectives were trying to determine if there were any underlying factors related to Lynn's death, such as a depressive state. They wondered if she had previously attempted to end her life and what could have caused the severe stomach pains she experienced. However, Jessie was unable to provide any answers. It appeared that she was not only grieving the loss of her employer but also withholding important information. Ultimately, Jessie was released due to a lack of evidence. The investigators were awaiting the official conclusions from a forensic expert following a toxicological examination. After the police became suspicious of Nurse Jennifer, they began to keep an eye on her mother, Jennifer. They interviewed Jennifer and learned that she had been a close friend of Lynn. She had helped her daughter, Jessie, secure a job with Lynn's home. Together, they provided care for Lynn, assisted Lynn in Lynn G with age-related issues, care, and providing everything else needed. However, Jennifer also raised suspicions among the police. At this time, the toxicology results appear to be particularly worrying. Given Lynn's age and health issues, it was unlikely that she had been ingesting eye drops orally for an extended period. Investigators needed to figure out how such a large quantity of the drug ended up in her system. Experts indicated that a lethal dose of the substance would require at least 4 bottles, while the results suggested Lynn had consumed at least 6 bottles, which should have led to severe stomach cramps and pain before her death. Shortly after Lynn's death, an unusual situation arose. Jessie and Jennifer purchased a new, large, and expensive television, even though their income was modest. Additionally, the police found the car that Lynn had given to her nurse, Jessie, to be suspicious. Investigators noted the peculiar behavior of Jessie and Jennifer, which increasingly suggested that Lynn's death was not voluntary. Typically, criminals attempt to cover up their actions and hide evidence to evade justice, but this situation appeared to be different. Besides, Jessie and Jennifer showed no signs of grief. Instead, they seemed to revel in the inheritance, which deepened the suspicions against them. The police began to suspect that Jessie might have orchestrated the murder. Jennifer did not have regular access to Lynn's apartment, but Jessie visited Lynn almost daily, allowing her easy access to Lynn's food and medicine. Jessie insisted that she truly loved Lynn and wanted to help Lynn. The two had become like family. However, the detectives suspected that Lynn had made a serious mistake by allowing someone who could potentially harm her into her life. The suspects, Jessie and Jennifer, stayed attentive to the investigation, frequently calling the police station to check on the case's progress. The detectives realized that Jessie and Jennifer weren't genuinely concerned about what had happened. Rather, they were worried about being found out. Their behavior indicated they were closely monitoring the investigation. More evidence of Jessie and Jennifer's involvement and a thorough investigation were necessary to ensure justice. Jessie and her mother noticed that the police had taken a greater interest in their activities. During each visit to the station, Jessie felt compelled to defend herself. She said had a close relationship with Lynn and they treated each other like family. Jessie argued that any suspicions against her were baseless, insisting it was just a coincidence that she was a nurse and always in close contact with Lynn. Being a nurse did not make her a killer, but the detectives relied on more than just assumptions. Initially, Jessie did not mention on the increased levels of tetrazzolina found in Lynn's blood. However, when she was cornered, she revealed that Lynn frequently used these eye drops and might have applied them without realizing it. Jessie attributed this to Lynn's cognitive issues, which sometimes caused her to lose control over her actions. However, the police quickly identified a key witness named Andrew Pooh. Although he was not related to Lynn, he described their relationship as close and friendly. Lynn had lived with Andrew's family, and he saw Lynn as his grandmother, she even helping him financially during his college years. Since she had no children, Lynn wanted to leave Andrew an inheritance, but he declined to avoid any suspicion of wanting money. Despite his refusal, Lynn insisted on naming him as her heir since she had no other beneficiaries. However, they never had the chance to finalize this arrangement. According to Andrew, Lynn had proposed leaving him an inheritance between $10,000 and $50,000. He frequently visited Lynn and knew Jessie, her nurse. Andrew suspects that Lynn's death may have been related to Jessie's fear of losing her inheritance, especially since she knew that Lynn intended to leave her fortune to Andrew. After Lynn passed away, Jessie unexpectedly inherited all of Lynn's property, which raised suspicions. Andrew approached Jessie hoping to receive part of the inheritance, but she claimed that Lynn had many debts and hadn't paid her bills for a long time. As a result, Jessie said most of the inheritance would go towards settling those debts. This led Andrew decided to consult lawyers to verify this information. After that, Jessie got in touch and arranged to meet with Andrew. She gave him documents that she proved Lynn's debt had been repaid. After settling all debts, Jessie said she had only $26,000 left and offered to share it with Andrew. However, when the police investigated, they discovered that these documents were fake, created using a computer program. It turned out Jessie hadn't paid anyone. This discovery led investigators to take a closer look at Lynn's financial situation. They quickly learned that during her time as a nurse, Jessie had conducted suspicious transactions involving Lynn's finances. She applied for a loan to the bank, the application was approved, and as a result the loan was disbursed. Even though the loans were in Lynn's name, Jessie was the one who actually used the funds. Ultimately, it was revealed that over the years, she had taken out about $300 in loans, of which only $88 was left by the time of the police investigation. In response to the financial claims made by the police officers, Jessie maintained that she acted at Lynn's request. She stated that Lynn provided the necessary documents for the loans and frequently asked her to purchase eye drops. Jessie mentioned that she had 4 bottles on hand, which Lynn had given her, and noted that she saw Lynn using the product correctly. She insisted that she did not supervise this process. However, police were skeptical of her account. At the crime scene, there were no eye drop bottles found near the body. Instead, pills were littered around, and no traces of those pills were found in Lynn's body. Lynn was said to have kept her bottle of eye drops on her nightstand, but a thorough search of the apartment revealed they were missing. The situation became increasingly complicated, suggesting that someone had staged the scene. It appeared that it had been discarded to hide evidence. The forensic expert believed that Lynn had been ingesting the eye drops for an extended period, leading to poisoning, severe pain, and ultimately death. It seemed unlikely that Lynn could have used such a large quantity on her own. This indicates that someone has poisoned her. Jessie, who spent the most time with Lynn and managed her diet and medications, emerged as the primary suspect. Suspicious thing, the detectives did not contact Jessie or summon her for questioning. Instead, she frequently visited the police station to ask about the investigation's progress. Jessie maintained that she had no motive to harm Lynn and denied any involvement in financial fraud. However, the circumstances surrounding the drugs continued to trouble the investigators, who began to apply pressure on Jessie. She shared bizarre stories about how Lynn supposedly enjoyed mixing vodka with eye drops, claiming this gave Lynn extra enjoyment from the drink. Jessie insisted she was unaware that regular eye drops could be dangerous and viewed it as just one of Lynn's eccentric habits. Jessie stated that on that fateful morning, she brought 4 additional bottles of eye drops to Lynn's apartment and claimed that Lynn even mixed them into her water. This situation continued for about 6 months until a tragic conclusion, making the story increasingly bizarre. Despite the circumstantial evidence gathered by investigators, detectives believed Jessie was fabricating excuses. Ultimately, they decided to arrest Jessie on suspicion of premeditated murder. Evidence from the crime scene, including Jessie's cell phone, was sent for analysis, which provided the police with more information. They discovered that Jessie was in regular contact with her boyfriend, Scott Craig. The conversations between Jessie and Scott particularly caught the attention of police. It became evident that Jessie's assertion of being unaware of the dangers of ingesting eye drops was untrue. She had been researching this information online for some time. By the time she started caring for Lynn, she was already knowledgeable about products containing the harmful substance, suggesting she had intentionally chosen medications that contained it in high amounts. Jessie first considered using eye drops as a way to poison Lynn because they could be easily purchased without a prescription. All she needed to do was persuade Lynn to take them orally or secretly mix them into Lynn's food or drink. Due to Lynn's cognitive difficulty, so this seemed simple. From Jessie and Scott's conversations, it seemed he was unaware that Jessie was attempting to poison Lynn. However, a few months before the incident, a conversation revealed that Jessie had mentioned Lynn's serious illness, including episodes of vomiting blood, which led to Lynn being hospitalized. Doctors later reported that she had been poisoned. The investigation showed that Jessie must have known the consequences of her actions. The police looked into Scott's potential involvement and brought him in for questioning. He denied any knowledge of the poisoning plan but claimed that Jessie had informed him about Lynn's previous poisonings. Scott viewed Jessie as a pathological liar, and their relationship was close to ending. He thought Jessie fabricated the poisoning story to gain his sympathy and reconcile with him. During another conversation in September, Jessie claimed Lynn was hospitalized and on medication, stating that Lynn is in intensive care and is on life support machines. In reality, Lynn had already passed away. Scott was fed up with the relationship and wanted to end it that day. However, Jessie attempted to manipulate him again by claiming that Lynn was in the hospital, hoping to elicit his sympathy. She was trying to hold on to their relationship. The situation was complicated. Was it a fatal overdose, or a carefully planned scheme to obtain an inheritance? It turns out there was a clear motive in Jessie's actions. Over time, motivation will reveal itself. It is possible that Lynn found out about this, leading to her murder. Jessie then took possession of Lynn's property and money. Additionally, Jessie was desperate to keep her relationship with Scott, who had mentioned breaking up multiple times. Jessie concealed the true state of Lynn's, creating a web of lies that made it hard to uncover the truth. Investigators found that Jessie refused to admit her guilt. She maintained that Lynn consumed 100 liters of vodka daily and added eye drops to it. In October 2023, the investigation revealed the full extent of Jessie's financial fraud. It was found that since 2016, Lynn's credit limit had increased from almost $0 to $72,000. This was just the beginning. After her death, nearly $16,000 was stolen from her apartment, which was allegedly used to pay off some debts. Jessie claimed she only repaid loans that were in Lynn's name, but the source of these funds was traced. The total debts amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, taken out from banks under Lynn's name. Additionally, items worth $155 were stolen from Lynn's home. Initially, these items were reported missing, but it was later discovered that Jessie started receiving money in her accounts shortly thereafter, likely from the sale of Lynn's possessions. Lynn was a wealthy single woman who rarely used credit cards or loans. Additionally, the sudden rapid increase in debt that shortly after she hiring a new nurse, Jessie, seemed suspicious. Reports indicated that Jessie visited the casino every month, gambling large amounts with her boyfriend Scott, who didn't question where the money was coming from. They often went to gambling establishments at least twice a month. The investigation revealed that Jessie had a prior criminal record. Despite being young, she had a significant history of offenses, including document forgery, fraud, and gambling. Since 2010, Jessie struggled with a severe gambling addiction. In February of that year, she defrauded 2 individuals out of $4,000 by taking out loans in their names. Although she didn't use fake documents, it was shown that she obtained these funds through deceitful methods. By April 2010, she had lost over $45,000. During this time, she borrowed an additional $2,500 and applied for a loan exceeding $6,000, falsely claiming that her mother, Jennifer, had approved it by using her mother's documents. This was, of course, a lie. Jessie managed to secure over $6,500 in credit, using her mother's car as collateral, but she never repaid this amount. As a result, her mother nearly lost her car and had to gather a large amount of documentation to prove that she was not responsible for those loans. Jessie was imprisoned for 2 years but was released early due to good behavior. Her mother stated that she struggled with a severe gambling addiction. The prosecutor's office claimed that 25-year-old Jessie committed premeditated murder to gain financial benefits from her victim, Lynn. By doing so, she attempted to eliminate her own debts. It is alleged that she killed Lynn, who had endured pain and progressive for years, without considering the consequences. Jessie described the act as one of mercy, said that she could no longer bear to see Lynn suffer. The lawyers argued that Jessie did not kill Lynn. They explained that Lynn had cognitive impairments and did not understand the risks of type of eye drops she was taking. They stated that Lynn believed that drinking vodka mixed with eye drops would help her sleep better, leading her to use the drops without realizing the danger. According to the prosecution, on the day of the murder, Jessie provided Lynn with water that contained the contents of 6 eye drop bottles. However, the lethal dose was only 1 bottle. In court, both Jessie and Jennifer testified that Lynn consumed the water with the 6 bottles of drops. Initially, Jessie, who was a nurse, advised Lynn against using the drops, but after a lengthy argument, Jessie eventually relented, unaware of the severe outcomes that could result. Afterward, Jessie left for a few hours on business, not knowing how much of the substance Lynn had actually consumed or how it would affect her. Especially since Lynn had previously been hospitalized for poisoning from the drops. Lynn was aware of the dangers associated with eye drops, which made the idea of her accidental poisoning implausible. Jessie also knew about the harmful effects of these substances, and a key point against her was that no bottles of the eye drops were found near Lynn's body. It was evident that someone assisted Lynn in taking the medicine. The trial was intense and emotional, with the judge actively engaging in discussions. On November 14, 2023, the jury convicted Jessie of first-degree murder, theft, and concealment of evidence. Upon hearing the verdict, Jessie broke down in tears. She was sentenced to life in prison but could be eligible for parole after 40 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Juffin. Sierra Juffin is a young girl who gets along with everyone. She has a cheerful, humorous, and energetic personality that brings joy to those around her. Even when she makes mistakes, she knows how to make her mother smile. As she grows up and enters high school, Sierra has maintained her adventurous spirit. She is not afraid to try new experiences, such as playing volleyball, and she is comfortable and confident both on and off the court. On July 19, 2016, Juffin's family returned home from vacation and started unpacking. Sierra was excited about her upcoming fall semester at university, especially her plans to study abroad. Her mother wanted to talk to her about it. Sierra is very active and recently bought a bike, but she hasn't had the chance to ride it yet. Whenever she finds some free time, she's eager to go biking. That day, Sierra left the house dressed casually in shorts and a tank top, with her hair in a ponytail. She told her mother she was going to visit her boyfriend Josh, who lives 712 miles away, and her mother approved of her plan. At approximately 1:05 p.m., Josh called Sierra's house. He was concerned because he couldn't reach her. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mother if she was home, she replied that Sierra wasn't home. Josh then informed Sierra's mother that Sierra had left his house shortly before 7 p.m. and that he hadn't seen or heard from her since. Sierra's mother immediately sensed that something was wrong because Sierra wasn't answering her phone as she usually did. She quickly contacted Sierra's parents and grandparents, who lived nearby, but they had no idea where Sierra was. Extremely worried about their daughter's safety, Sierra's and Josh's families began an urgent search. Sierra's mother immediately got in the car and was determined to search everywhere possible. She carefully checked every corner and both sides of the road, but still could not find any trace of Sierra. Meanwhile, Sierra's aunt, along with her husband and son, also joined the search. They were worried that Sierra might have had an accident. Despite their best efforts, they still could not find any sign of her. When Sierra's mother returned home, she urgently contacted Sierra's friends via social media, hoping that someone had seen or heard news about her. However, there was no response. After many hours, there was still no sign of Sierra. Very worried, Sierra's mother decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a neighbor called to report that County Road 6 was blocked. Sierra's family rushed out of their home to see what was happening. They found a chaotic scene, with police officers refusing to let them through and providing no information. This left Sierra's mother in a panic, wondering if the police had found her missing daughter. Desperate for information, local police decided to seek the assistance of the FBI. EY promised to provide any updates to Sierra's family as soon as possible. Sierra's family couldn't sleep and lay awake, thinking about what they should do the next day. Sierra's mother and aunt refused to wait for answers and took matters into their own hands. Her mother began calling hospitals, hoping to find any sign of Sierra. After several calls with no results, they felt increasingly hopeless. However, a glimmer of hope appeared when they received a tip from Detroit, Michigan, about a young girl who bore a striking resemblance to Sierra. That woman was taken to the hospital without any identification after trying to escape from a moving car. She was severely injured, with multiple broken bones. In order to identify her, a nurse asked Sierra's family to check her body. Sierra's mother confirmed that Sierra had a scar on her calf and a pierced navel. The woman in the hospital appeared to match Sierra's description. Sierra's family hoped that the girl in the hospital was Sierra. However, they quickly discovered that it was not her, which was devastating for them, as they had pinned so much hope on finding Sierra. The next morning, police came to Sierra's home to provide an update on the events of the previous night. They reported that one of their officers had discovered a destroyed cornfield nearby. When he arrived at the area, he noticed signs of a struggle. He also saw traces of a motorcycle and decided not to disturb any evidence. During the incident, he caught a glimpse of Sierra's purple bicycle. Police later found several items at the scene, including both men's and women's sunglasses, a pair of bloody socks, and a screwdriver. Based on these findings, the police believe Sierra was abducted at this location. During the investigation, detectives extensively interviewed Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend, Josh. Through their inquiries, they discovered that Sierra and Josh had been best friends since they were 7 years old. Their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship during their freshman year of high school, where they were known to be a lively and fun-loving couple. One of their shared passions was skiing, which they often enjoyed together. After graduating from high school, Sierra chose to attend the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green. Despite the distance, their commitment to their relationship remained strong, and they frequently discussed the prospect of marriage. However, Sierra wanted to prioritize her studies before settling down. Their relationship remained serious, and they had weathered the challenges of a long-distance relationship. Detectives determined that Sierra arrived at Josh's home at approximately 1 p.m. on July 19th. According to the information they gathered, at around 6:30 p.m. that day, Sierra decided to leave Josh's home and wanted to ride her bike home. Concerned for her safety, Josh offered to accompany her on his motorcycle. On the way home, Sierra insisted that Josh turn around and let her walk home by herself, wanting to demonstrate her independence. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways, with him returning on his motorcycle and Sierra continuing her ride home. During the investigation, detectives found motorcycle tracks in the corn near Sierra's bike. This raised the question of whether these tracks could belong to Josh's bike. Detectives could not ignore this potential connection and began gathering more evidence to determine if there was any link to Josh at the scene. They quickly organized a search team to look for any clues about Sierra's missing. On July 14th, a resident reported that, while driving down the road, they picked up a motorcycle helmet lying on the side of the road. When they heard about Sierra's situation, they decided to take a closer look at the helmet and found red stains on it, possibly blood. The helmet was found in the area near where Sierra's bike was located in the cornfield. To find the owner of the helmet, the police approached Josh regarding his motorcycle helmet. Josh provided the helmet, proving that he had been wearing it when he went out. Additionally, the police confirmed that Josh had returned home after interrogating his parents. This evidence eliminated Josh from the list of suspects involved in Sierra's missing. Investigators were determined to identify the owner of the blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the side of the road. They recognized the importance of DNA evidence, so they decided to send it to the crime lab for analysis. News of Sierra's missing quickly spread through the community. Residents formed search parties to thoroughly explore the area for any clues that could help locate her. The community also organized a candlelight vigil for Sierra at the local high school. Hundreds attended, holding flickering candles, as they came together in a display of grief, hope to her safe return. 2 days into the investigation into Sierra's missing, police received information about a truck seen speeding through the area. There was speculation that Sierra might have been kidnapped and sexually trafficked in the truck. The informant provided the police with the license plate number. Based on this clue, they interviewed the truck's owner. It was discovered that the speeding truck was not related to Sierra's abduction. The man explained that another car had suddenly pulled up from behind, possibly a family member searching for Sierra, which startled him. Consequently, he instinctively accelerated. After 48 hours of investigation, there were no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. Her family found it increasingly difficult to remain hopeful as each day passed and the chances of finding her alive diminished. Although they tried to remain optimistic, the grim reality of the situation became increasingly hard to ignore. The police conducted a door-to-door search for Sierra. Eventually, the investigation led them to a farm not far from where her bicycle was found. The property was about an acre in size and included several structures, such as a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of the property, James Worley, was met by the police at the farm and was questioned about the day Sierra went missing, hoping to gather relevant information. James surprisingly revealed that he had gone out on a motorbike that day, but the bike had broken down, causing him to lose some items, such as a screwdriver and a helmet. This revelation shocked the detectives, as those items were the same ones found at the scene of Sierra's abduction. James's unwitting involvement in the crime scene became a red flag for the detectives. Sierra's missing and her connection to James were becoming increasingly suspicious. While questioning James Worley, the detectives noticed scratches on his face, indicating that he had been involved in a fight. This further intensified the police's suspicions regarding James and raised numerous questions, such as whether the scratches were the result of a confrontation with Sierra. Detectives returned to the police station after questioning James Worley about Sierra's missing. They wanted to check his file, hoping to find relevant information. As they dug into James's past, they discovered that he had a dark criminal record, which included an attempted kidnapping of a young girl 26 years earlier, on July 4, 1989. On July 4, 1989, 26-year-old Robin Garter planned to attend a neighborhood picnic. Her mother was preparing potato salad and other food for the event. Robin thought it would be a good idea to go for a bike ride before the picnic. However, she had not brought any water with her, and it was getting very hot and uncomfortable. At that point, Robin considered going home to quench her thirst. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the sound of a car approaching. Robin figured she would wait for the car to pass and then go home. But before she could react, the car struck her bicycle. After the collision, Robin was hauled into the ditch by the side of the road. Dazed and confused, she still heard the driver stop and run out to check on her. The driver was none other than James, approached Robin anxiously, trying to assess the situation. The situation quickly became very dangerous. James suddenly struck Robin from behind, hitting her head very hard. Then, he pressed a screwdriver to her neck, threatening her life with menacing words. He ordered Robin to get into his car immediately. With the screwdriver pressed to her neck, James forced Robin into the car. After pushing her inside, he attempted to handcuff her. However, Robin resisted strongly, not allowing him to secure the second handcuff. Despite her screams for help, there was no one in the deserted field to hear her cries. Robin's persistent struggle against him caused her to nearly faint several times, but she persevered. In the unusual silence, she suddenly heard a faint sound in the distance. And she looked closely. She noticed a motorbike approaching James's vehicle. Realizing that this might be her only chance to escape, Robin began waving her arms repeatedly to attract the motorcyclist's attention. Fortunately, the motorcyclist recognized her urgency and quickly stopped. In her desperate plea for help, Robin told the motorcyclist that James intended to kidnap her. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the back of the motorbike, escaping her captor and the vehicle. The man on the motorbike took Robin home, where she eventually fainted. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance. The motorcyclist, wanting to assist the authorities, led the police back to the scene. They were surprised to find James Worley still there with his car. When questioned, James was cooperative and provided identification to confirm his identity. However, his version of the story differed significantly from what was initially believed. He completely denied any intention to kidnap Robin. According to James, Robin had been riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, which left him unable to avoid a collision. He claimed that after the accident, Robin was in a state of panic, which was why he had handcuffed her, not with the intention of causing harm, but to tie her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted that his actions were motivated solely by genuine concern for her well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 after attempting to kidnap Robin. He was convicted of kidnapping and subsequently incarcerated in the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. James was sentenced to 6 to 10 years in prison but was released 3 years later for good behavior. When Robin learned that the man who had tried to kidnap her was released, she was terrified. The fear that James might strike again haunted her. Armed with information about James Worley's criminal past, the police decided to visit his residence. With a search warrant in hand, the officers went to the home of James, who was suspected of being involved in Sierra's missing. They found nothing unusual in the house. However, when they examined James's backyard, they discovered a small shed tucked away in the corner. Upon opening the shed, they found several bales of hay inside. The officers conducted a thorough search of the barn and the surrounding area, looking for evidence that could link James to Sierra's missing. All areas were searched meticulously, with the aim of uncovering any hidden items or clues. During the search, the detectives found a small green box hidden in a corner of James Worley's barn. They carefully approached and opened the box, revealing its contents. Inside, they found several carefully labeled and sealed bags containing underwear, socks, and tube tops in Ziploc plastic bags. As they examined the other items, they came across a pair of purple panties stained with a blood-like substance. The detectives were concerned about other disturbing discoveries that might await them in their search of James's compound. The detectives noticed a piece of plywood on the ground. Recognizing its potential importance, they carefully removed the board to reveal a small chest freezer buried in the barn. When they opened the freezer, they detected a strong chemical odor similar to bleach, which heightened their suspicions. As they continued to investigate, they found other disturbing elements partially hidden among the straw bales. Among the items discovered was a dirty mattress pad. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys intensified their concerns, as these items are often associated with kidnappings and other nefarious activities. Detectives collected all the evidence for DNA testing. James attempted to defend himself by claiming that the items were part of a pornographic entertainment business he was planning. However, the evidence gathered was far too overwhelming to support his explanation. The combination of evidence collected from T. He crime scene, along with the incriminating items, led to James' arrest for Sierra's murder. Sierra's family was shocked to learn that her abductor lived far from her home. This revelation left them with many questions, the most pressing of which was undoubtedly, where was she? Detectives conducted a thorough investigation of James' property, leaving no stone unturned. They meticulously searched every inch of the property to ensure a comprehensive examination. To aid in the search dogs were brought in to detect any potential human remains. During the investigation, detectives discovered a pond. Recognizing its potential significance, they carefully drained the pond to search for evidence that might have been concealed beneath the water. Detectives examined the insulation at the front of the attic. As the investigation continued, they expanded their search to neighboring properties, realizing that evidence might be scattered outside James's property. They patiently pursued leads in all directions. At that time, a farmer walking in his field noticed a strange area of corn that appeared to be covered. He decided to investigate further. As he approached the area, he saw a mound of dirt and immediately thought it could be a grave. The farmer's concerns were heightened by the recent events surrounding the search for Sierra. He wasted no time in calling the police, sharing his suspicions and the exact location. When the farmer called for help, the police arrived on the scene. They noticed a newly turned area of dirt, which led them to suspect it could be a grave. After carefully assessing the situation, the police began investigating the area, taking care not to disturb any potential evidence. The police conducted a thorough search of the scene, hoping to find clues about Sierra's whereabouts. However, despite their best efforts, their search was fruitless. Detectives expanded their search, using drones and helicopters to survey nearby farms in hopes of increasing air chances of finding Sierra. During their investigation, the detectives discovered an area of land covered with fresh corn. Their dogs detected the smell of decomposition, suggesting that this could be a crime scene. When investigators dug into the area, they discovered the remains of a person. Based on the evidence, it was believed that this was Sierra's body. Unfortunately, her hands and feet were bound, and there was a foreign object lodged in her mouth, making it difficult for her to breathe. The evidence suggested that she had died of asphyxiation. That night, Sierra's family received the devastating news they had feared. The police had found Sierra's lifeless body. The news was heartbreaking, and the family wept. It was a tragic moment, and they were overwhelmed with grief. A month after Sierra's abduction and murder, James Worley was indicted on 19 related charges, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, James went to trial on these charges. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, James pleaded not guilty to all counts. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning their verdict in James Worley's case. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, James was convicted on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The severity of the crime resulted in the imposition of the death penalty for James Worley. In conclusion, the harrowing case of Sierra Juffin has come to a tragic end, revealing the dark depths of human cruelty and the devastating impact it can have on a family and community. The relentless pursuit of justice led to the discovery of Sierra's remains and the conviction of James Worley, whose past offenses and heinous actions were instrumental in bringing him to justice. As Sierra's family continues to mourn their loss, they can find some measure of solace in knowing that James Worley has been held accountable. This case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the enduring fight for our justice in the face of profound tragedy. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jemia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bamber. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jemia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in the fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bamber, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jemia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6th, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6th, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee, or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Juan Carlos Garcia. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971 in Monterrey, Mexico. She is the second of 3 children. Her parents, Maria and Manuel, did their best to provide their children with a good education and aspirations for a better life. Together with her brother Javier and sister Ana, Abril's family lived a simple but hopeful life. Abril, Ana, and Javier all excelled in school, participating in musical activities, sports, and developing their talents. However, Abril showed early on a special ability in mathematics and business skills. She was an avid reader and was always the best student in her class. As a teenager, Abril started working to become financially independent, saving and always having savings from her school days. She was very disciplined, able to plan and manage her time effectively. Her goal was to get a quality college education to secure a well-paying job with plenty of career advancement opportunities. After graduating from high school, Abril was accepted into the most prestigious university in Nuevo Leon, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her classmates described her as smart, focused, and ambitious, but also fun-loving, kind, and always ready to help others. After graduating, Abril was hired into the sales department of one of the largest and fastest-growing companies in the country. A few years later, she tried her hand at digital sales, a new and rapidly growing field, and realized it was the right fit for her. She quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the company's CEO within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and on her way to the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, provided for her family, and had many plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unstable, disappointing her loved ones. Abril believed that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. In the mid-1990s, when Abril's career was going strong, she met a young man named Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. A little over 3 years older than Abril, he had similar career ambitions to hers, which impressed her. In turn, he was attracted to her beauty, charm, kindness, radiant smile, along with her sharp intellect and strong determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious University of Science and Technology, where he excelled in the fields of economics and commerce. He then went on to study at Harvard University in the United States before returning to Mexico and building a successful career in the rapidly growing e-commerce sector. After meeting at a conference focused on the latest financial technologies, Abril and Juan Carlos met several more times as their companies worked on joint projects. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized that he had fallen in love with this intelligent and beautiful woman. Juan got Abril's phone number through mutual acquaintances, called Abril, and asked her out. Initially, they were both attracted to each other. Abril found Juan intelligent and energetic, able to chat about any topic. The relationship between the two developed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that time, both had achieved considerable success in their careers and were involved in developing online stores, a promising direction. Their life was like a real fairy tale, attracting the envy and admiration of those around them. After 3 years of marriage, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia, in 2001. At that time, Abril was 30 years old and she was extremely happy because the birth of the child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband also seemed happy and loved their newborn daughter. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son named Juan Carlos Jr. And 2 years later, the family welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andres. Abril is a hardworking, active young mother who hardly takes any maternity leave. She still maintains a balance between her motherly responsibilities and her thriving career. Every day, Abril cooks delicious meals, helps her children with their homework, takes them to sports and tries to be a good friend to them. Their family appears to be perfect. They are wealthy, successful, and have 3 well-behaved children. However, appearances do not always reflect reality. The problems within their family were not known for a long time, even to those closest to them. In fact, one showed his true colors in the early years of their marriage. He was hot-tempered, aggressive, and very demanding. He did not like to compromise and wanted everything exactly his way. At first, Abril thought that over time, his personality would soften. However, Juan Carlos's true personality was still there. But they still had joint projects, and their teamwork brought impressive results. However, over time, he became more angry, and the verbal arguments gradually escalated into physical violence. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan had a period of calm, trying to restrain his emotions. But this restraint did not last. Unfortunately, after the birth of his eldest son and continuing after the birth of his third child, he no longer tried to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos often vented his anger and negative emotions on his wife, not keeping any negative emotions to himself. He insulted and belittled his wife, who was the mother of their children, and it seemed that she had to endure this suffering. He often physically abused his wife, but in order not to leave any marks on her body, he forced her to hide her injuries with clothes or makeup. All these actions were done to protect his perfect reputation and pride in being considered a good man. Abril kept silent for many years, trying not to tell her sister and mother about her terrible life. She could support herself with a well-paid job and could raise her children, giving them a good and stable life, but her husband was a rich and influential man. He could use his power and money to gain custody of the children through the courts, forcing her to stay silent and endure this abuse for a long time. Knowing the true nature of Juan Carlos, Perez could not accept that her daughter and son were left alone with someone who could do anything without control. The family situation reached a dead end by the beginning of 2010. Those who had thought this was an ideal family began to suspect that something serious was going on inside. Abril became desperate, terribly thin, suffered from insomnia, and often had bruises on his face and body that became difficult to hide and impossible to explain. Juan Carlos remained calm and confident, pretending that everything was fine in public. He continued to portray the role of a loving and caring husband, polite and affectionate to his wife, but the reality was completely different when he was at home. He became a cruel person, making it dangerous to be around him. Although Abril's loved ones asked for a divorce, Abril insisted that everything was fine and that she would resolve the issue with her husband herself. 2014 marked the peak of Sanchez's career when he became the director of a large trading company and one of the most influential people in the field. After his promotion, his family moved to Mexico City and settled in a large house in one of the capital's most beautiful neighborhoods. Their children attended a prestigious private school. Abril hoped that the move and the complete change of scenery would improve their relationship. However, the opposite happened. Juan continued to hurt and insult his wife, even in front of their children. He began to accuse her of infidelity without any basis. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to violence, claiming to find evidence of her infidelity. He monitored her phone and emails, and banned her from using social media. After that, finding no evidence, he even hired a private investigator to follow Abril and take pictures of any man who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, although her husband's behavior became completely unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare. On the surface it seemed like a happy and successful marriage. Many people were even jealous of Abril because she had a famous, influential, wealthy and, as many thought, caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family visited the Perez family in Monterrey to celebrate Christmas. However, Juan Carlos continued to treat his wife roughly, even in front of her parents. The incident left them extremely shocked and appalled. After witnessing this, Abril realized that she could not continue living like this and decided to divorce. She informed Juan of her intention, but he reacted with rage, choking her to the point that she almost fainted. The incident only stopped and Abril's mother entered the room and intervened. Upon returning to Mexico City, Abril decided to divorce and moved to another bedroom in the house. However, this did not protect her from her husband's violence. On the morning of January 4th, her husband entered the bedroom and attacked her with a baseball bat. Abril was lucky to escape death by slipping out of bed. She screamed, and their children ran into the room. The youngest son protected his mother while the eldest son took the baseball bat from his father. Together, they ran out of the house and to the hospital where Abril received the medical attention she needed. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep wound above her eyebrow, which required stitches. Shortly after Abril and the children left the house, Juan Carlos contacted a lawyer and posted on social media about the conflict between him and his wife, claiming that his wife had betrayed him. Juan Carlos also claimed that his wife had taken all the money from the safe and that when he tried to stop her, she had stabbed him with a knife. As evidence, he posted a photo of a bloody knife and blood stains on the floor. However, the blood on the floor was actually Abril's, from her own room. The photo of the knife was also taken from the internet. Despite this, Juan Carlos' friends believed his story and reshared it on social media, drawing attention to the incident. While still in the hospital, Abril sued her husband for intentional injury. After being discharged from the hospital, she left the house and moved in with her sons. According to the temporary decision, she was granted sole custody of the children. Their eldest daughter, now of age and in college, sided with her mother and denounced her father's cruelty. Juan was ordered to pay alimony to his ex-wife and sons while they lived with their mother. The amount of alimony was relatively small, about $300. However, Sanchez refused to pay and faced jail time. However, given his status as an influential businessman, he believed he would not face any punishment. After experiencing the nightmare, Abril decided to return to her hometown of Monterrey, to her parents' house, taking her children with her. There, she filed for divorce and monitored the situation. At the same time, she began providing online support and counseling to women in similar situations. She also planned to open a center for psychological and legal support for victims of domestic violence. However, the judicial system was disappointing. It was not until September 2019, 8.5 months after the incident, that Sanchez was arrested for causing bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was sent to prison, but after just over a month, he successfully appealed and was released in November of that year. The case was presided over by Judge Federico M., who surprisingly reclassified the case, leading to a new trial. During the trial, Abril's hospital photos and entries from her medical records were not presented. At the same time, the testimony of the woman and her sons was not considered sufficient grounds to detain Juan Carlos. Furthermore, Juan insisted that his ex-wife was turning the children against him. Juan was released immediately from the courtroom because Judge M considered that his actions did not pose a direct threat to the victim's life. According to the judge, if Juan had really intended to end his wife's life, he would have done so, especially since she was asleep during the attack and could not resist. Abril was shocked and frightened when she learned that her ex-husband had been released. She immediately realized that Juan had all the connections and had paid off his way out of jail, putting her and her daughter's lives at risk. She wrote a formal letter to the judge expressing her fear and concern for her life, but it did not seem to have any positive impact. After being released, Juan Carlos initiated a lawsuit for custody of the children. He demanded that she return to Mexico City to attend the hearing, and if she did not attend, the case could be decided without her, which would certainly be disadvantageous to her. She had no choice but to return to the city. Returning to Mexico City was a tragic scene that Abril could not avoid. On November 25th, Abril overcame her fears and went to Mexico City. She feared the man she had been living with, but she knew she had to face reality to protect her children. She planned to leave the city immediately after the hearing and had already bought a plane ticket back, which Juan Carlos also knew. On the day of their custody hearing, a tragic incident occurred. After the hearing, Abril, her sons, and their lawyers got into a car and headed to the airport. However, when they reached a traffic light, a motorcyclist stopped next to their vehicle and suddenly pulled out a pistol, firing 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. He then quickly fled the scene. 1 bullet passed through and grazed the youngest son who was sitting in the back seat, but fortunately none of the children were seriously injured. Abril was taken to the nearest hospital, where doctors tried to save her life for more than 6 hours. However, due to severe injuries and loss of blood, they were unable to save her, and she passed away that evening. Abril's family immediately flew to the capital and asked the authorities to arrest the person they believed was behind the attack. However, law enforcement agencies had a different view. They said that without identifying the shooter, it would be difficult to determine his motive and the details involved. Meanwhile, Juan Carlos remains free and the police begin searching for the perpetrator, a process that could take a long time. The orphans have been placed in the care of relatives on their mother's side for the time being, while their father prepares for another legal battle to regain custody. Abril's sister wrote a social media post criticizing Juan for the incident. However, her account was blocked and later deleted. Nevertheless, Abril's family decided to continue fighting and draw public attention to the case. They stressed that the attack occurred on a day dedicated to protests against domestic violence, which made the incident even more despicable. The public outcry forced the prime suspect, Juan, to flee. Abril's family drew attention to the tragedy that had befallen them. At the same time, People also began to openly discuss many cases of men trying to kill women but being unpunished and still going free. Mexican politician and women's rights activist Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo has officially confirmed that Abril's case will be reinvestigated and classified as femicide. Judges could face consequences if Juan Carlos's guilt is proven. Juan Carlos, a businessman who posts frequently on social media, has called for his ex-wife's perpetrators to be found and punished to the fullest extent of the law. He has stated that despite his disagreements with his ex-wife, he would never harm the mother of his children. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, has taken a stand against her father and left an angry comment, accusing him of cruelty and including photos of her mother in the hospital after Juan Carlos attacked her with a baseball bat. Despite the case receiving extensive media coverage, it was decided to leave Juan free while the investigation is ongoing. He has been placed under a restraining order and must report to the police weekly. However, after he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest. As expected, no one could find the defendant. Juan used his money and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexico contacted Interpol and reported the fugitive accused of serious crimes. The next day, Juan was declared an internationally wanted man. To investigate the case, the police hired a crime scene reconstruction expert. During this time, they also tried to locate the hired criminal. The results showed that he did not act alone. Street camera footage showed two vehicles following the car of Abril, her children, and their lawyer from the courthouse. The motorcyclist committed the murder and appeared to be in constant contact with the people in the aforementioned cars to receive instructions. Investigators spent months identifying some of the people involved in the incident. Finally, on March 5, 2020, two suspects were arrested in connection with the case. Surprisingly, the participants in this case did not resist arrest. They immediately began to confess to their actions and surrendered in the hope of reducing their sentences. Through investigation, it was determined that the real mastermind was Juan Carlos. He paid a large sum of money to 7 people who directly participated in this act. The first people to be arrested were the driver of the car that participated in the chase and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. The investigation also showed that, before the incident, Juan Carlos hired several experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards while in prison. One of these criminals was released a week before the incident, and the other was released a few days later. After being released from prison, Juan contacted his accomplices again and asked them to find trustworthy people to carry out an assassination. He promised to pay a large sum of money to each of them if they succeeded. Once all the participants were identified, Juan transferred the promised money and provided details of the route and vehicle the victim would use. However, the most difficult part of the plan was luring Juan's ex-wife to Mexico City. He resorted to threatening Abril that he would take the children if she did not appear in court. Although she complied with the court order, she had no intention of staying in the capital and planned to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan learned this information from his sources. It was not until late October 2020 that 3 people involved in the criminal conspiracy were arrested. They were initially arrested on suspicion of distributing narcotics. It was only when they were brought to the police station that it was discovered they might be involved in a serious crime. All of those arrested were members of a major drug trafficking gang headed by Maldonado, also known as Balto. He served time with Juan Carlos and protected him. Maldonado then agreed to help Juan in the murder of his ex-wife in exchange for a large reward. Maldonado was arrested in November 2020 and began to testify. According to his testimony, Juan had been looking for trustworthy people to end the life of his ex-wife, and Maldonado agreed to help. With these statements, it was clear that Juan was both a client and an organizer of the crime. The previous attack on Abril with a baseball bat was reclassified as attempted murder. The court eventually issued an arrest warrant for Juan on charges of murdering his wife. However, his whereabouts are currently unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining participants in Juan's commissioned murder were found and arrested. One of them was arrested for another crime at the time. In addition, during the extended search, the weapon used to carry out the fatal shots was found. A total of 9 people involved in this criminal group have been arrested, of whom 7 were directly involved in the pursuit and murder of Abril. Although it has been nearly 5 years since Abril's death, the main perpetrator and the person who hired him to carry out the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still at large and his whereabouts are currently unknown. The person who directly shot the mother of 3 children was sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 other criminals who participated in the car chase and assisted the shooter were also sentenced to 50 years in prison each. The other arrested participants are still under investigation, and their fate has not been decided. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Chris Watts. Shanann and Chris Watts. The two met in 2012 and were both from North Carolina, with Shanann from Aberdeen and Chris from Spring Lake. They got married on November 3, 2012. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, did not attend the wedding due to their strained relationship with Shanann. Cindy later explained that she didn't get along with Shanann and felt she treated her son poorly. After a year of marriage, Shanann and Chris made a significant decision to buy a new home in Frederick, Colorado. This move marked a new beginning for the couple as they started their life together in their new home. Shanann's lifelong dream of becoming a mother finally came true on December 17, 2013, with the birth of her daughter, Bella. 2 years later, on July 17, 2015, she welcomed her second daughter, Celeste. Those who knew Shanann described her as a kind and compassionate person who radiated love and positivity. She always strived to create the best life for herself and her family. As a mother, Shanann loved her 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, more than anything in the world. Shanann was devoted to providing her children with the care and support they needed to thrive. Bella, the older of the 2 sisters, was a compassionate and caring child who naturally took on a protector role with her younger sister Celeste. From a young age, Bella showed a strong desire to look out for Celeste's well-being. Celeste, on the other hand, was a lively and energetic child who brought joy and laughter to everyone around her. Shanann was active on social media, using it to share videos that showcased her personality in daily life. Her friends and family enjoyed these videos, which often featured her husband Chris and their daughters. In her posts, Shanann frequently expressed her deep love and gratitude for Chris. While Shanann's loved ones admire their happy marriage, they also noticed that Chris tends to be reserved and not easily approachable. However, because Shanann clearly loves him, they respect his presence in Shanann's life. In June 2015, Shanann and Chris Watts faced severe financial difficulties and decided to file for bankruptcy. The couple struggled with a large mortgage, car payments, loans, and medical bills, in addition to a substantial amount of credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann was employed at a hospital call center. A year later, in 2016, Shanann began a new career as a consultant for a multi-level marketing company called Lovell, where she sold a nutritional supplement called Thrive, which was delivered through a patch. Her colleagues say Shanann is passionate about her work, with one colleague describing her as having a charisma that makes everyone feel welcome and supported. Although Shanann was happy with her life with Chris and their 2 daughters, she had always dreamed of having a 3rd child, a baby boy, to complete their family. Her wish was granted in spring 2018, when she discovered she was pregnant for the 3rd time. Elated by the news, Shanann planned a surprise for Chris. She waited for him to return home on May 28. Chris walked into the room, not knowing the surprise that awaited him. When Shanann revealed that she was pregnant with a baby boy. After hearing the news, both Chris and Shannon were overwhelmed with joy. They decided to name their unborn child Nico. During the summer of 2018, while pregnant with Nico, Shannon visits her family in North Carolina. Chris stays behind in Colorado for work. While in North Carolina, Shannon takes her daughters to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie. During the visit, Cindy offers Celeste a snack. Despite knowing that Celeste has a severe nut allergy, Cindy gives Celeste a snack containing peanuts. This incident upsets Shannon, who feels that Cindy has put Celeste's life in danger. Shannon was upset and sent a text message to Chris expressing her frustration. She told him he should call his dad and tell him how he felt about his mom putting their daughter's safety at risk that day. Shannon believed Chris's mom was trying to upset her by taking risks with their child's life. While Shannon was visiting family in North Carolina, she noticed a change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, which left her confused. When she asked him about it, Chris said he was busier at work due to new employees and that everything was fine. Despite his reassurance, Chris's sudden lack of communication concerned Shannon. On July 31st, Chris flew from Colorado to North Carolina to join Shannon and their daughters, Bella and Celeste, for the week. The girls were excited to see their dad, and as soon as Chris stepped off the plane, they ran to him, eager for hugs. Chris picked them up and held them tightly. Chris's behavior toward Shannon was clearly different. He didn't greet her with a kiss, just a nod of acknowledgement. Shannon felt hurt and couldn't understand why Chris would act this way. She opened up to a friend via text message, expressing her concern that Chris had changed. Shannon's texts were filled with sadness and confusion. She told her friend that Chris was ignoring her, and they were barely communicating, even when they were in the same room. Instead of talking face-to-face, they were exchanging messages on their phones. Shannon even sent a picture to her friend, showing her and Chris sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. In her messages, Shannon revealed her suspicions that Chris might be having an affair. Shannon confided in her friend that Chris had told her he no longer believed they were compatible, which left her heartbroken. Desperate to save their family, she proposed that they seek couples counseling to work through their issues. She was willing to make concessions and put in the effort to repair their relationship. However, Chris refused to consider counseling. Shannon soon realized that Chris was not willing to meet her halfway or make any compromises. Despite her efforts to save their relationship, Shannon came to understand that Chris was not interested in finding common ground or working through their problems together. After returning to Colorado from a trip to North Carolina, Shannon, Chris, and their daughters settled back into their normal routine. However, Shannon's return was short-lived, as she soon left for a business trip to Arizona. While in Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed anxious and upset, rather than her usual happy self. One evening, Shannon opened up to her friends in their hotel room, sharing her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to attend couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shannon was with her friends in Arizona, she received a notification about a restaurant charge on the credit card account she shared with Chris, which raised her suspicions. She couldn't shake off the feeling that Chris might be seeing someone else. Around 1:48 a.m., Shannon returned home from her business trip. Shannon's close friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Footage from their doorbell camera confirmed that Shannon had indeed entered her house on August 13th. However, as the day progressed, Shannon failed to send her usual good morning messages, alarming her friends. A missed OB/GYN appointment scheduled for 9:30 a.m. did little to quell their concerns. However, when Shannon missed another engagement, a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, Nicole's concerns escalated, realizing something was seriously wrong as Shannon was now uncharacteristically incommunicado for the entire day. Nicole had a nagging feeling that something was wrong and decided to drive to Shanann's house. As she approached the house, her anxiety spiked. Shanann's truck was parked in the garage, which was very unusual. Nicole went to Shanann's house and knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would answer and explain that she was just tired from her flight the day before. But Shanann didn't respond. Nicole contacted Shanann's husband, Chris, to see if he knew where she was. Chris told her not to worry, thinking that Shanann might have taken their daughter to visit a friend. However, this explanation did not make sense. Shanann didn't have any plans to meet up with her friends, and they were starting to get concerned. They told Chris that they were going to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Celeste, missing to the police. Chris didn't want to involve the police, but Nicole was worried about her friend and decided to call 911 to report them missing. When the police arrived at Shanann and Chris's house, an officer from the Frederick Police Department spoke with Nicole. The officer's body cam footage showed that Nicole was clearly distraught about her missing friend. As Nicole was explaining everything she knew about Shanann and her daughters, Chris arrived at the house. However, unlike Nicole, he didn't seem particularly worried about their disappearance. During the search of the house, the officer found Shanann's purse, which was surprising since she and her daughters were missing. Inside the purse, the officer discovered medication for Shanann and her 2 daughters, which added to the concern. The discovery of the purse made Nicole even more anxious, but Chris remained calm. The officer also found Shanann's wedding ring, left on the bedside table, which seemed unusual given the circumstances. The officer and Chris then went to a neighbor's house to review footage from their security camera. The camera's angle captured part of the driveway and garage of Shanann and Chris's house, which might provide some clues. Chris can be seen on footage opening the garage door and leaving his home at 5:28 a.m. While reviewing the footage, Chris's behavior changed dramatically, appearing nervous and agitated. His neighbor even commented on Chris's unusual behavior, expressing doubts to the officer about Chris's actions. Chris's reluctance to join the search for his missing wife, Shanann, and their daughters, Bella and Celeste, raised concerns with Shanann's friends. They found it incomprehensible that Chris was not worried about his family's disappearance. As the investigation continued, officers went door to door in the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shanann or anything out of the ordinary. The search for Shanann, Bella, and Celeste intensified the next day, with the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joining the effort. The Boulder Police Department also provided cadaver dogs to aid in the search, both on the property and inside the house. As officers searched the home, one handler observed that the house had a strong smell of cleaning solutions and appeared unusually clean. This sparked suspicion, prompting the officers to take a closer look. The presence of cleaning solutions suggested that someone may have attempted to conceal evidence or erase potential clues. Meanwhile, Chris gave an interview to a news station outside his home. He insisted that he and Shanann had not argued before she went missing, and expressed his wish for his family to return home safely. Chris expressed his longing to be reunited with his family, stating that his house felt incomplete without them. However, his behavior during the interview raised suspicions. Despite his emotional words, Chris appeared detached and unemotional, which puzzled those who knew him. Shanann's friends who watched the interview felt his behavior was inconsistent with his pleas for his family to return, and that only added to their concerns. On August 14th, Agent Coder interviewed Chris again. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shanann may have taken the girls to a friend's house to relax. Meanwhile, the police department had received multiple reports of possible sightings of Shanann and her 2 daughters. Chris was shown various photographs, but he was unable to identify any of the individuals as his missing wife and daughters. Agent Coder also asked Chris about his marriage to Shanann. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shanann and, to his knowledge, she had never cheated on him either. During an interview with Agent Coder, Chris exhibited suspicious behavior, frequently touching his neck with his hands. This caught Agent Coder's attention. The lack of updates from the authorities only intensified the family's desperation. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but he was asked to return the following day, August 15th, for a polygraph test, to which he agreed. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and then drove to the Frederick Police Department, where he was scheduled to take a polygraph test. The test was administered by Tammy Lee, a polygraph expert from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his wife Shannan's disappearance and claimed he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. However, his test results showed a score of -8, which was significantly lower than the -4 score needed to pass. This outcome led detectives to believe that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, the polygraph expert, confronted Chris about his failed test results. Chris admitted to causing Shannan emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker and expressed regret for his infidelity. However, he continued to deny any involvement in his family's disappearance. Later in the interview, Chris asked to speak to his father, Ronnie. The officers hesitated, worried that Ronnie's presence might cause Chris to ask for a lawyer. However, they let Ronnie into the interrogation room, hoping that Ronnie's presence might encourage Chris to confess. When Ronnie arrived, Chris told his father that he had killed Shannan, claiming that he did so because Shannan had harmed their daughters, Bella and Celeste. The detectives did not believe for a moment that Shannan had hurt her daughters. Chris eventually confessed to burying Shannan in a shallow grave at one of his work sites and disposing of the bodies of their daughters in oil tanks. Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At his sentencing hearing, the judge stated that Chris's crimes were the most inhumane and brutal he had ever seen. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sierra Breland. Sierra Locklear, a cheerful and ambitious woman from Cleveland, Georgia, grew up with a dream to live in Atlanta one day. To achieve her goal, she had to leave her home state and pursue higher education. She attended the University of Tennessee for her undergraduate degree and then earned her law degree from Florida State University. Sierra became a successful lawyer, specializing in insurance defense. According to her mother, Kelly, Sierra was an energetic person who overcame obstacles to achieve her goals. She was happy, loving, and dedicated to her career. In October 2020, Sierra met Xavier Breland on Tinder, and their relationship quickly blossomed. They got married just 6 months later, and Sierra soon became pregnant. During this time, she provided legal assistance to Xavier in his dispute with his ex-wife. They decided to start a new life in Carmel, Indiana, where Sierra secured a job at a law firm. At the end of 2021, she gave birth to a son, whom they named Jackson. Xavier and Sierra appeared to be a perfect couple from the outside, but their relationship was troubled from the start. According to Shelby Campbell, Sierra's best friend, problems began to surface shortly after they started dating. Sierra had initially tried to end things with Xavier, but he refused to accept rejection. He showed up uninvited at her apartment and sent threatening messages when he saw her with another man. Sierra gave Xavier another chance, and they married 6 months later. However, Sierra confided in Shelby about her growing fears and concerns about her husband's behavior. In one text message, Sierra expressed her feelings of being torn between her love for Xavier and her fear of his increasingly bad behavior. She worried about their future together, citing his lack of remorse for his actions and his tendency to blame her for his behavior. Their text exchanges, which Shelby shared, demonstrate the depth of Sierra's fear. On multiple occasions, Sierra called the police out of desperation, but by the time they arrived, Sierra would downplay the situation, fearing the consequences of speaking out against her husband. This cycle repeated itself in both Georgia and Indiana, where the police were called to their residence multiple times. Sierra's parents, Kelly and Nick Lair, were aware that her home life with Xavier was troubled. They encouraged her to end the relationship, reassuring her that she could always return to the safety of her family home. Sierra's journey to Georgia began when she and Xavier embarked on the 11-hour drive south. Sierra arrived at her parents' house on February 19th, where she spent the night with relatives she hadn't seen since moving to Indiana. Sierra planned the trip to visit her family in Georgia, secretly intending to stay and divorce her husband Xavier due to escalating abuse. She told her parents about her plans and the abuse, and they supported her decision. On February 19th, Sierra arrived at her parents' house in Cleveland, Georgia, and reaffirmed her decision to divorce Xavier. The next day, she left to pick up her son Jackson from her mother-in-law's house in Johns Creek, Georgia. Sierra sent a text message to her best friend saying that she was waiting to pick up Jackson, but Xavier was refusing to hand him over to her. On February 21st, Sierra texted Nick, her father, saying she'd return home the next morning, and he gave her permission. When her father didn't hear back the next day, he reached out, and Sierra replied that everything was fine, just that she was feeling under the weather. Nick texted Sierra on Wednesday and Thursday, but she didn't respond. By Friday, her family was worried. On Saturday, Nick received a call from an Indiana police officer, who said Sierra was missing and her husband had filed a report. The family was shocked, wondering why Sierra hadn't told them she was in Indiana. Nick called Xavier's father. He denied seeing Sierra, but it was later revealed that Xavier had reported her missing to the Carmel Police Department on February 26, 2022. Video footage showed her last known location was her mother-in-law's home in Georgia on February 24th. Sierra disappeared on February 25th after leaving her Carmel home to walk to a store around 1 p.m. She was last seen wearing a black top and purple shorts, despite the low temperature. However, she never arrived at the store and left behind her personal belongings, including 3 phones and her 5-month-old son. The family finds it suspicious as Sierra had a burner phone for emergencies and wouldn't leave her baby behind. Kelly, Sierra's mother, said Sierra confided in her about the couple's financial struggles and alleged her son-in-law was physically and emotionally abusive. When Sierra went missing, leaving her baby behind, Kelly feared the worst. Kelly described Sierra as a loving mom who prioritized her son's care. When Sierra vanished without the baby, her husband's alibi seemed suspicious. 2 days later, police visited Xavier, Sierra's husband, after an accidental gunshot at his home. His criminal past, including a 2005 felony conviction, raised suspicions. Xavier was named a person of interest in his wife Sierra's disappearance and arrested on an unrelated charge. He had an outstanding warrant for aggravated stalking in Qua County, where he had tracked his ex-wife using a GPS device in their children's stuffed animal. 2 weeks after Sierra's disappearance, police, volunteers, family, and friends searched neighborhoods in Johns Creek, focusing on areas along Medlock Bridge Road. They passed out flyers and set up electronic signs asking for the public's help, and contacted companies to display Sierra's information across Metro Atlanta. The family of Sierra sought information on her disappearance, specifically regarding a white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan. During the investigation, Xavier, Sierra's husband, was the only person seen getting out of the car at gas stations and shops. Law enforcement officials searched the mother-in-law's house, collecting evidence with a search warrant, and forensic professionals and cadavered dogs to look for signs of a struggle or potential blood stains. A search of Xavier Breland's residence by authorities, including a K-9 unit, found no trail. A video from March 2022 shows Xavier telling his children that Sierra was kidnapped and won't be coming home, contradicting his previous statement to police. The video was obtained while Xavier was in jail for aggravated stalking, unrelated to Sierra's disappearance. In August 2022, Xavier was found not guilty, but he was quickly arrested again and extradited to Indiana to face a new charge, unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon. At his initial hearing, Xavier asked the judge to reduce his bail to an amount his mother could afford. The judge set the bail at $35,000, lower than the $50,000 requested by prosecutors. Xavier promised the judge that he would turn his life around if released, even offering to get a job as a truck driver. Despite Xavier's plea, the judge ultimately set the bail at $100,000. Xavier was eventually released in February 2023 after posting bail. However, this decision would have consequences that will be discussed later. Xavier was repeatedly questioned about Sierra Brain's disappearance, but he maintained his innocence, claiming she vanished after going to the store. He stuck to this story, denying any involvement in her disappearance. The search for evidence in Sierra Brain's disappearance is a daunting task, considering the vast areas of land that need to be searched. Court documents revealed that some items were taken from Xavier's mom's home. Crime scene investigators removed the carpet and mattress from the home on April 21, 2022. After Xavier's arrest on March 1, 5-month-old Jackson was taken into state care. Sierra's parents, Nick and Kelly, are now able to be with their newborn grandchildren and are working to bring the infant back home to Georgia. Despite Sierra remains missing. Over the past year, multiple searches have been conducted, focusing on specific areas, but sadly, no leads have been found. Xavier Breland is the only person of interest named in Sierra's disappearance, but no charges have been brought against him. Her family believes he knows what happened to her and is the only one who can give them answers. Kelly LeClaire thinks Sierra's body could be in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, or Indiana and is asking outdoor enthusiasts to be on the lookout. Sierra's parents now have custody of the couple's child. Xavier was released on bail for an unrelated firearms case, but failed to appear in court and a warrant has been issued for his arrest. The FBI is now involved in the case, and the search for Sierra and Xavier continues. The disappearance of both Sierra and Xavier has raised many unanswered questions. Sierra's mother believes Sierra feared Xavier and didn't plan to return to Indiana with him. With both missing, the case is now more urgent. The trial for Xavier's gun charge has been postponed, and authorities and Sierra's family are seeking public help to locate them and shed light on their disappearances. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vera Pektaleva. Vera Pektaleva was born on September 24, 1997, in Kelos, Kovo Oblast. She grew up to be a cheerful, creative, and talented individual who excelled in singing competitions during her school years. Despite her parents, Oksana and Juffin, divorcing while she was still in school, Vera maintained a good relationship with both of them and their new partner. People who knew her described Vera as kind, positive, and avoiding conflict. After graduating from high school, Vera surprised her family by enrolling in the State Technical University in Kovo instead of pursuing a career in the arts. Her mother, Oksana, lived in Kisilov, about 110 miles from Kovo, and Vera would visit her during her free time. During one of these visits in 2016, Vera met Vladislav Kanyus, a young man her age. Vladislav was her opposite in many ways. He lacked direction, was introverted, and had a quick temper. He had dropped out of school after 9th grade and came from a troubled home. His mother had abandoned the family, leaving him to live with his father, who had legal problems and eventually took his own life in front of Vladislav. This traumatic experience had a lasting impact on Vladislav's life. Vera and Vladislav's relationship was unlikely, as they had little in common. Despite this, Vera fell in love with him. However, her parents were strongly opposed to the relationship due to Vladislav's troubled past. They wanted a better life for Vera and disapproved of her choice. Vera's mother, Oksana, stated that they waited for Vera to end the relationship, but instead, she stopped talking about Vladislav with them. Vladislav was never invited to family gatherings and did not appear in Vera's social media photos, making it seem like she was hiding him. In 2019, Vera and Vladislav moved in together in Kovo, with her parents helping to pay for the apartment. Although Vladislav was unemployed and had no intention of changing that, he enjoyed living with Vera, who was beautiful, smart, and financially stable. As a result, she supported him. The relationship was tense, and Vladislav's alcohol abuse was a major concern. Vera's parents suspected that Vladislav was physically abusing her as well. Vera ended her toxic relationship with Vladislav in November 2019 with the help of her parents, who assisted her in paying for a new apartment. Logically, Vladislav should have moved out, but he refused to do so, as he enjoyed living at someone else's expense. According to Vladislav's testimony, he and Vera had a fight on December 15, 2019, because he wanted to go to a nightclub, but she declined. Vladislav claimed that during their relationship, Vera began to distance herself from him, often traveling to Kalos, and eventually admitting to communicating with someone else. Keep in mind that this is Vladislav's testimony, and it's up to you to decide how credible his words are. According to Vladislav, a month before their breakup, Vera told him she was leaving him. Later, he found out from a mutual friend that she was already seeing someone else, a guy named Alexander from Selos. He didn't know Alexander personally. After learning this, he wanted to talk to Vera about it. They were still living together in the same apartment at the time. On December 15, 2019, they had a fight and she left, taking some of her things with her. Even though they weren't together anymore, they stayed in touch by phone. On January 12, 2020, he called Vera and offered to help her move her remaining belongings to a new place. She agreed, and they planned to meet up the next day to do the move. When January 13th came around, Vera showed up, and they packed up both her stuff and his, since he was planning to move out of the apartment too. He didn't want to stay there without her. On January 13th, 2020, Vladislav and Vera consumed beer, lure, and vodka while packing. They both became intoxicated. Despite their inebriated state, they did not argue during the drinking session, which continued until 5 a.m. on January 14th, 2020. However, a conflict emerged when Vladislav brought up their relationship and suggested they get back together. He also confronted her about seeing another guy, which Vera denied. This led to an altercation, during which Vera became aggressive, swearing, insulting, and physically attacking Vladislav. She kicked him in the groin area at least 5 times and slapped him in the face at least 8 times. Although he didn't feel pain from the slaps, the kicks caused him physical discomfort. Vladislav claimed that Vera's aggression was triggered by his discovery of her infidelity, which made him angry. Vera, on the other hand, accused him of prying into her personal life and continued to insult him. This is the version of events as told by Vladislav to the police. However, there are reasons to believe that Vladislav's testimony may not be entirely truthful. Vera was determined to move out of the apartment she shared with Vladislav and wanted no part in drinking with him. She asked her friend to assist her with the move and sent a voice message at 5:08 p.m., saying she was already packing her belongings and would be at her new apartment by 6 p.m. She requested her friend's help in transporting her belongings from the taxi to the new apartment. However, just 3 minutes later, Vera sent another voice message inviting her friend to come to her current apartment to help with the move. But before she could finish, Vladislav intervened, stating that no one was allowed in the apartment, effectively blocking her friend from coming. The situation was escalating, and at 5:15 p.m., Vera sent a quiet, low-voiced message to her friend, seemingly a distress call, as she attempted to keep it from Vladislav's ears. 10 minutes later, at 5:25 p.m., Vera sent another voice message, but this time Vladislav's voice could be heard, instructing Vera's friend not to bother them and to wait for Vera to text her. By 7:19 p.m., Vladislav had taken control, sending a voice message himself. From that point on, Vera was silenced, and her friend no longer heard from her. It seemed that Vera was trapped alone with Vladislav. The night took a dark turn when, at around 3 a.m., the neighbors on the same floor were awoken by blood-curdling screams coming from apartment 738. A bystander described the unfolding tragedy as a massacre. The screams from the apartment were so loud that 15 people, including Vladislav's brother, gathered in the hallway. Vladislav's brother recalled his brother's previous threats to harm Vera and realized they needed to intervene. Since the door was made of iron, the neighbors searched for tools to pry it open. Meanwhile, Vera's desperate cries for help continued to echo from the apartment. The bystanders called the emergency service multiple times, but their calls were ultimately part of a separate investigation. Despite the repeated calls, the police failed to arrive for 30 minutes until 6:30 a.m. During this agonizing period, the neighbors made 7 emergency calls, but no help came. The last words they heard from Vladislav were, "Vera, forgive me, I love you very much." Finally, the neighbors found a crowbar in a nearby parking lot and broke down the door. Tragically, they found Vera dead and Vladislav, who was heavily intoxicated, in the bathroom. Meanwhile, the 112 operators were indifferent to the emergency calls, chatting, laughing, and drinking tea, complaining about being disturbed as Vera lay dying at the hands of her former boyfriend. The police did not arrive at the scene until after Vera's death had been reported. They later justified their delayed response by claiming that one of their patrol cars had no gas and that all available officers were busy handling other emergency calls. As a result, the operators who handled the 112 emergency calls and the police officers on duty that night were also put on trial. A police station video was made public, showing officers displaying a shocking lack of urgency. Vladislav Kanyus initially claimed that he and Vera didn't have any conflicts until 5 a.m., but forensic evidence disputed this, showing that he had lied. In reality, Vera's first injury occurred around midnight, which meant that Vladislav had brutally beaten and injured her for 6 hours before she eventually died. The autopsy results were shocking, revealing a total of 100 injuries on Vera's body, including stab wounds, a broken nose and ribs, and evidence of strangulation around her neck. The community was outrageously upset, and more than 1,000 people attended her funeral, exceeding the church's capacity. Vera's mother, Oksana, was left devastated by the unrecognizable state of her daughter's body, which required an extensive 4-hour restoration process at the funeral home. At the same time, Vladislav was providing a false account to investigators, trying to downplay his role in the vicious crime. The indictment alleges that the police officers were negligent in their response to the situation. They had access to gasoline, but even if they didn't, they should have taken necessary steps to resolve the issue. However, they didn't treat the situation as urgent and failed to take prompt action. Furthermore, the 2 police officers refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any wrongdoing. Their defense was that when witnesses reported the screams and cries for help, the investigation team was already occupied at a different location where a corpse had been discovered earlier. In 2022, Vladislav Kanyus was sentenced to 17 years in prison after admitting partial guilt. He was also ordered to pay $45,000 in compensation. Vera's parents were shocked by the leniency of the sentence and planned to appeal. However, Vladislav didn't serve his full sentence. In April 2023, it was discovered that he had received a presidential pardon after serving just 6 months in prison. Furthermore, photos of him in military uniform surfaced online in November 2023. Vladislav Kanyus, the person responsible for Vera's death, was not only pardoned but also relieved of the obligation to pay compensation to her parents. The news sparked widespread outrage in Russia. The press secretary of the Russian president explained the pardoning procedure, stating that it involves a series of steps. First, the convict must confess to their crime. Then, the request for pardon is reviewed at multiple levels, including the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Regional, Federal District, and Central Commission, before reaching the president. Alternatively, convicts can also redeem themselves by fighting on the battlefield, where they risk their lives under fire. This alternative path to redemption is difficult to accept, especially for Vera's parents, who were devastated to learn that Kanyus was free to start anew while their daughter would never have that chance. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lynn Keel. Lynn and Elizabeth Keel had been married for over 20 years. Lynn worked as a truck driver while Elizabeth was employed by Microbac Laboratories. They lived in a secluded house in Nash County, North Carolina. On January 1, 2006, Elizabeth slipped on the icy steps outside their house and fell, hitting her head on the concrete corner. The injury was fatal, and her life was tragically cut short. After a year, Lynn began to rebuild his life after a devastating event. He made a career change, leaving his job as a truck driver to pursue a new path in real estate. In 2007, his real estate work brought him to Latin America, where he met Diana, a 26-year-old woman from Bogotá, Colombia. Diana was not only attractive, but also had a kind heart and was a dedicated single mother to her young daughter. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and Diana was drawn to the idea of a better life in America. She moved to the United States to be with Lynn, and they settled into his home in Nash County. This was the same house where Lynn's wife, Elizabeth Keel, had tragically died in an accident about a year earlier. Before long, Lynn and Diana got married, and soon they welcomed a son named Max into their family. Diana graduated from Nash Community College in 2017 and began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center the same year. In the early years of her relationship, everything seemed normal, but over time, things took a turn for the worse. According to Diana, her partner Lynn became controlling and verbally abusive, often speaking harshly to her. By 2019, Diana's daughter Laura had turned 18 and was attending the University of North Carolina at Wilmington after graduating from Southern Nash High School. Meanwhile, Diana's 10-year-old son Max was living with his parents. Diana's colleagues and patients at Wilson Medical Center held her in high regard, respecting and admiring her both personally and professionally. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received an unexpected message from Diana that read, "Mom, I love you very much." Esperanza was disturbed by this message because she was aware that Diana was miserable in her marriage and longed to get a divorce, but Diana's fear of her husband prevented her from taking the intervention. 3 days later, Laura tweeted a plea for help, saying her mom Diana was missing and asking others to spread the word if they saw or heard anything. On the same day, Laura contacted the medical center where her mother, Diana, worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had seen or heard from her in the past 48 hours. An employee at the medical center notified the police, requesting a welfare check on Diana. The co-worker informed the dispatcher that Diana had been unreachable for 2 days. When the police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn Keel was present. It was unusual that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, rather than by him. Lynn told the officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days prior, on March 8th, when she left the house. The presence of her car still parked outside the house raised further suspicions. Lynn was summoned for further questioning. When interrogated, 57-year-old Keel stated that his wife had gone out to run errands but never came back. He claimed she sometimes left for several days at a time, but his explanation was not believable. He was released without being charged. Meanwhile, Diana was reported missing, prompting the police to launch a search for her. The investigation revealed that Diana hadn't used her cell phone or bank cards in several days, which was a disturbing sign. The house where this incident took place is located in a secluded area, far from any neighbors who could provide valuable information to the police. Despite this, detectives discovered that on the morning of March 8th, Diana and Lynn had a loud and intense argument on their front porch. On the day Diana went missing, a courier delivered a package addressed to her, making him the last person to see her, aside from her husband, Lynn Keel. After speaking with Diana's co-workers, the police were convinced that she wouldn't abandon her 10-year-old son and flee. The only reason Diana didn't divorce Lynn was her fear of losing custody of her child. Everyone the detective interviewed suspected only one person of being involved in Diana's disappearance: her husband, Lynn Keel. Early in the investigation, a troubling discovery was made. 2 years prior to Diana's disappearance, Lynn had taken out a life insurance policy on her worth over $1 million, with him as the sole beneficiary. A domestic dispute had taken place at the Keel house in 2008, although no further action was taken. Just 2 days into the investigation, the police received a disturbing call. A North Carolina Department of Transportation employee reported finding something on Polk's Hole Road. A man called the police to report something suspicious in the woods, saying he wasn't sure what it was, possibly a body, but he didn't know how far in it was. The dispatcher asked if it was at the end of the road, and the caller confirmed he would wait there. Tragically, what the caller had stumbled upon was Diana's body, which appeared to have been there since the day she went missing. It turned out the caller was a worker who had been checking an illegal dumping site when he made the discovery. The body was found on Polk's Hole Road, a dead-end street surrounded by farmland. Considering the location was 30 miles from Diana's home, it was fortunate that the police found her body when they did. If not for the worker's discovery, it could have taken the police much longer to find her. At the police station, the investigators questioned Lynn about Diana's disappearance. He stuck to his story, claiming that she would often leave for several days, but always come back. However, this contradicted what her co-workers, relatives, and friends had said. It was common knowledge that Lynn Keel exerted total control over his wife's life, even preventing her from socializing with friends. Despite the inconsistencies in his alibi, the police released him pending the outcome of the autopsy. 2 days after the body was found, authorities confirmed that it was indeed Diana Keel. Her death was devastating for her children, family, and friends. The medical examiner's report revealed the shocking details of Diana's death. The autopsy showed that she suffered from severe skull fractures and multiple sharp wounds on the left side of her face and neck. Notably, some of these injuries occurred after her death, suggesting that the perpetrator may have had a personal vendetta against her. When police arrived to arrest Lynn Keel and search his home, they found that he had already fled. A nationwide wanted list was issued, warning that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and that he could be dangerous. After being questioned at the police station, Lynn Keel drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and escaped. A search warrant was issued for the home Lynn shared with his wife Diana, and authorities seized a collection of firearms, including rifles, pistols, and revolvers, as well as swords, a machete, and multiple knives. During the search, authorities also found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana's 18-year-old daughter in a Dodge Ram owned by Lynn Keel. When asked about the contents of the diary pages, the sheriff declined to comment, stating that he did not feel comfortable sharing the information. The search for Lynn Keel, Diana's husband, continued as his whereabouts remained unknown after leaving the state. Although the sheriff's office received tips about his truck's location in Texas and Florida, no further information about his capture was confirmed. Stone requested the public's help to look out for Keel's pickup truck with the listed license plate number at local motels and hotels. On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was found, Arizona State Police arrested Lynn Keel, 34 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. At the time of his arrest, he had a large amount of cash and canned goods, allegedly planning to escape into Mexico. Following his arrest, Lynn Keel was flown back to Nash County, where he was charged with his wife's murder and kidnapping. Investigators believed Diana was still alive when she was put into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left to die. Forensic evidence found in the bedroom of their home confirmed that the attack on Diana took place there. After abducting Diana, Keel went to a remote area and later visited a local Walmart to purchase cleaning supplies, which he used to try to conceal evidence of the crime. The heinous nature of the crime, combined with Keel's attempted escape from justice, sparked widespread media coverage at the local, state, and national levels. As a result, the public defender requested a change of venue to select a jury pool outside of Nash County, away from the intense media scrutiny. Lynn Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges in October 2021, avoiding a long trial. By doing so, Keel accepted responsibility for the crimes. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense team requested that the judge consider his deteriorating health, specifically his kidney failure, and the fact that he has been in prison for 2 years during the sentencing. However, Diana's mother addressed the court, remembering the tragic reason her daughter was killed. She took the opportunity to convey a crucial message to women who may be in similar situations, urging them to leave abusive partners and not stay in harmful relationships. Diana Alejandra Keel's family expressed their gratitude to law enforcement for capturing and bringing to justice Lynn Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder. It remains unclear what motivated Lynn Keel to commit the crime, but it's possible he was driven by his discovery that Diana planned to meet with a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings and was also aware of a life insurance policy worth over $1 million. Lynn Keel received a prison sentence of 32 to 41 years. However, the investigation didn't end there. Authorities also looked into the death of Lynn Keel's first wife, Elizabeth, which was initially ruled an accident. But her family had always questioned the events that led to her death. Elizabeth Keel's body may be exhumed if new evidence arises. Dr. John Butts, a veteran medical examiner, only considers exhumation when there are unanswered questions. While some initially accidental deaths were later deemed murders, there's been no new information in Keel's case in 2 years, suggesting no reason to reopen the investigation. However, new details may emerge in the future.